Chapter 1387. In Nether Prison. In the land of the Nether Chef clan. Sizzle. In the Nether Chef clan, flames towered into the sky. Some Nether chefs were cooking. The sound of pots being tossed, the clanking of spatula and iron wok, the sound of chopping vegetables, and the sound of setting bowls, the sound were noisy, and the clanking sounds resounded continuously. Suddenly, in the distance, a dark cloud slowly surged over from afar. The Nether Chef clan chefs froze. Many of them subconsciously looked in that direction, and they even forgot what to do with their hands. "What's that?" a Nether chef asked with a puzzled look on his face. However, no one replied him. That was because everyone's gazes had shot over and landed on a tall and sturdy figure that was slowly walking over from under the black clouds. Who was he? Doubts emerged in everyone's minds. Zhuang narrowed his eyes and walked slowly. The corners of his mouth curved upward into a smile. When he came to the Nether Chef clan's land and saw so many chefs cooking, his blood seemed to boil. There was only one voice in his head that kept rumbling. Zhuang waved his hand, and the kitchen knife on his waist flew into his hand, spinning in it. Then Bufang grabbed it, and a buzzing sound rang out. With the kitchen knife in his hand, he swept it across everyone present and finally fixed it on a Nether chef in the distance. The chef's challenge starts with you. Swish! The sound of something shattering kept ringing out. There were 4 arrays hovering around the perishing pot. They were gourmet arrays. Bufang's divine will had reached the 3rd level. His divine will had been strengthened, and he was more confident in controlling subtle forces. Especially when his cultivation base had broken through to the level of the great sage, his strength had been enhanced again. That was why he had the courage to combine the gourmet arrays. There was only one gourmet array in the perishing pot, Explode. Although its power was good, it could only compete with those of the same level. Facing Di Ting, a mere perishing pot was naturally not enough to kill him. Therefore, Bufang chose to combine the other gourmet arrays. Bonus, imprisonment, time, these 3 arrays were added together. The power of the perishing pot increased in an instant. The heaven and earth farmlands will of the Great Path seemed to have expanded in an instant. It was as if a world was about to descend. Buzz 4 golden arrays hovered around the dried pot. Accompanied by steam and fragrance, they flew toward Di Ting. In the sky, the Harkin hovered in the air. As he watched the ball of light that enveloped Bufang crumble, a grave look appeared in his eyes. Even the power of the laws couldn't kill this guy. Although he wasn't serious, the great sage shouldn't have been able to block such a powerful attack. The dried pot flew over, twisting the void around it. It should be quite powerful. However, the power of the laws surpasses the will of the heavenly Tao. Is there need to try? The Harkin replied calmly. He held out his chubby hand. Then, the hand began to transform into a furry dog paw. The dog's paw swept across the sky, slapping at the perishing pot thrown by Bufang. The power of law lingered above his dog paw. This paw contained supreme power. He wanted to blow up Bufang with one blow. He had lost his patience with Bufang. Hiss! The void seemed to be overwhelmed and was about to be torn apart. 4 arrays hovered in the air, wrapping around the dried pot. The spinning pot sped over, turning into a stream of light. It streaked across the sky like a shooting star. Di Ting focused his eyes. He threw out his paw. Immediately, the paw collided with Bufang's perishing pot. There was an explosion. Boom! A terrible rumble swept across heaven and earth, rolling and surging, destroying heaven and earth. The moment he touched the perishing pot, Di Ting's expression changed. He was very surprised. He stared at Bufang. Everything in front of him was enveloped by the flames of the explosion. A huge energy lotus emerged in the void. First, it was a bud, then it bloomed. Lotus leaves fell, accompanied by a rumbling sound. It seemed to be connected to another world, in which stood the heaven tree and the tea tree were swaying. A vast amount of spiritual energy surged. A terrible power erupted. Di Ting sucked in a cold breath. How could the will of the Great Path be so terrifying? Was it the will of the Great Path of a first-class great world? Impossible. Countless mysterious patterns swept across Di Ting's paw. The law of light bloomed and surged, fighting against the terrible power of the will of the Great Path. Even the will of the Great Path of a first-class great world couldn't crush the laws. This was against common sense. Di Ting's pupils constricted. Seeing his power of the law crumbling, he suddenly panicked. He never thought that the will of the Great Path that Bufang comprehended could crush his power of the law. He was a god. How could a god be defeated by a mortal? Impossible. Everything is fake. Di Ting growled. His face was ferocious. In the next moment, resplendent light burst out from his body, dazzling and eye-catching. He pushed the terrible power of the law to the extreme. Unfortunately, he was just a demigod, and his law was incomplete. Boom! The energy instantly engulfed him. Di Ting's face twisted at this moment. In the distance, Bufang hovered in midair, gasping for breath. He condensed 4 arrays with his divine will, fused them into the perishing pot, and threw them out. Even Bufang found it a little strenuous to use such a method. However, the effect was remarkable. With the addition of the 4 arrays, the will of the Great Path that the heaven and earth farmland projected into the perishing pot kept growing stronger. This was the power that could fight against Di Ting's power of the law. Looking at the huge energy lotus blooming in the starry sky, the art of explosion, people couldn't help but sink into it. Boom, boom. The energy lotus kept exploding. Terrible fluctuations surged within it. Suddenly, Bufang's expression froze. From within, a figure could be seen flying out. With a ripping sound, it rushed into the tumbling clouds in the sky. Bufang's mind flickered. His figure quickly followed after the others. Hell, Acheron's city, everyone's hearts were pounding. They raised their heads and looked at the sky, which was constantly rumbling. There was no doubt that the battle in the sky was very fierce. Suddenly, their eyes narrowed as they carefully looked over. They found it. A huge vortex suddenly exploded in the sky. Within the whirlpool, a fireball smashed down rapidly like a falling meteorite. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. It's over. Honorbu really can't beat Di Ting. Have I been sent back to hell? That's right. How can a mortal fight against a god? Is Honorbu going to die? Everyone in Yellow Spring City was in a state of panic. Many people looked at the fireball that was rapidly falling from the sky, and they were all dejected. They could easily guess the result. Although Bufang had broken through to the 9 Revolution Great Sage, Di Ting was a demigod. The gap between a demigod and a great sage was like the gap between heaven and earth. Even someone as strong as Hades Tenzing was beaten like a dead dog in front of Di Ting. Bufang was a chef, and he was not good at fighting. How could he fight Di Ting? Everyone understood this. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A terrible whistling sound came from the sky, coming closer and closer. It was extremely fast. Outside Acheron City, some of them had already begun to flee at top speed. However, there were also people who were not afraid of death. They ran crazily out of the city, toward the place where the fireball landed. Even if they might die, they wanted to see Honorbu's last face. They were Honorbu's loyal customers. Black smoke rose and flames surged. It whistled across the sky and kept falling. Finally, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the fireball landed outside Yellow Spring City. A loud boom rang out. The moment it hit the ground, it was as if the whole hell was shaking. Terrible waves of air rushed over. In Acheron City, all the experts gathered energy and turned it into a shield to block the impact of the energy. Otherwise, the whole Acheron City might be overturned. Rolling hot air surged, the yellow sand tumbled, and the sand and stones were sent flying. Nether puppeteer Patriarch laughed. Although her body was cracked by Bufang's walk, she couldn't help but want to laugh. She was laughing excitedly. Di Ting had punished that chef. Just thinking about it made her excited. She moved sideways and flew out of the city. Azi held the little dragon in her arms, thought for a moment, and then followed. What a pity for such a good chef. The more she thought about it, the more regretful she felt. This is a chef who is even better than Ajwang. Rumble. The aftermath of the explosion gradually weakened, leaving only black smoke billowing in the ruins. Outside Acheron City, a big hole had been blown open. The direction of the Acheron River had been changed. The walls had collapsed in all directions, and the city walls were cracked. It was enough to show how terrible this explosion was. Even a great sage would be smashed to pieces by such an impact. Unless he had a strong, fleshly body like Tyrant Patriarch, he might be able to survive. On the city wall, it was crowded with people. Everyone craned their necks to look at the huge crater. It was a huge pit, and it looked very shocking at first glance. Even the terrain had been changed by it. On the city wall of Acheron, the crowd was silent. Some were sad, and some were sighing regretfully. When they thought that they would never be able to eat Owner Bu's food again, they felt suffocated. No one thought that Bu Fong would be spared. After all, the great sage was no match for a demigod. Rumble. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch leaped up from the city wall. The broken spider spears on her back emerged one by one, then fell to the ground with a clanging sound. They slid across the ground and sped toward the deep pit. Her pupils constricted, filled with excitement, and a strong killing intent surged in her eyes. Die! Die! You must die, boom! 8 spider spears struck the ground. The ground crumbled in an instant. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch leaped up. The spider spears reflected a cold luster in the air. Then, they flew toward the center of the deep pit. Her divine will couldn't sense the chef's aura. Was he dead? It was good that he was dead. Even if he was dead, she had to stab him to vent her hatred. The people on the city wall of Acheron were in an uproar. They didn't expect Nether Puppeteer Patriarch to be so vicious. It made sense that a woman's heart was the most vicious. Suddenly, all the people on the city wall froze. They looked up at the vortex of clouds that had been blown open in the sky. From within it, a figure slowly floated down from the sky. Oh, the figure seemed somewhat familiar. The crowd froze. Then, everyone's eyes narrowed as they carefully looked over. This time, they really saw it clearly. When they saw it clearly, they sucked in a cold breath. Everyone looked as if they had just seen a ghost. They looked at the figure in the clouds, then at the huge pit in the ground. They were dumbfounded and horrified. What happened? What the hell happened? Ozzy covered her mouth in disbelief. Looking at the figure slowly descending from the sky, she felt as if a storm was raging in her heart. Bu Fong wasn't dead. How could he walk down from the sky unscathed? Then who was the one who fell to the ground? Who was the one who fell from the battlefield of the stars like a meteor? Who else could it be? If it wasn't Bu Fong, then it could only be Di Ting, the demigod. A demigod fought against the great sage, but the demigod was knocked to the ground? Was this a joke? Boom! Nether Puppeteer Patriarch shot forward, his face ferocious. He raised his spider spears and thrust them down. Suddenly, an extremely angry roar came from the deep pit. Get lost! Boom! A stream of energy lashed at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, shattering her 8 spider spears. Her body flew backward like a cannonball and smashed into the city wall with a boom. The impact nearly collapsed the wall, leaving a deep dent in it. Black smoke surged. In the ruins of the pit, the sound of rubble could be heard. The sound of light footsteps filled the air. Then, Di Ting's body, which looked like a little boy, slowly walked out of it. His cold eyes were fixed on Bu Fong, who was hovering in midair. For a moment, the atmosphere froze. Di Ting looked very miserable at the moment. His body was scorched black, and his dog clothes were tattered. Her adorable appearance had long since disappeared. Good, very good. Di Ting glanced at Bu Fong, then at the beam of light rising into the sky from Acheron's little restaurant. He could feel that the beam of light was connected to the chaotic universe, as if a supreme existence was watching slowly. He was afraid that he couldn't stop Earth Prison Dog's breakthrough. Since he couldn't stop it, then Di Ting's eyes flashed with a cold gleam. The next moment he raised his hand. With a rumble, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, who was embedded in the wall, was pulled out by a great suction force. With a clang, she hovered in front of Di Ting. Half of D Ting's face was covered by Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body, while the other half was fixed on Bufong. His eyes were fixed on Bufong. Then, he raised his chubby palm and thrust it into Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's chest. Then, he pulled out the Source Stone embedded in it. His palm clenched the Source Stone tightly. His power exploded out, and with a crack, the Source Stone was crushed. Specks of light poured out of the Source Stone and went into D Ting's body. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body trembled violently. Her eyes were filled with disbelief as she stared at D Ting. Then, her life force slowly faded from her body. A rumble rang out. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body fell to the ground. Meanwhile, D Ting's aura kept rising. The next moment, he let out a long roar. It seemed to correspond to the beam of light emitted by Lord Go in the restaurant. A beam of light also burst out of his body. Chapter 1388. Has the Harken gone mad? Everyone in Acheron City was stunned when they saw Truth Listener emit a resplendent beam of light. Everyone's eyes were glued to this scene, and their pupils involuntarily shrank. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was dead, killed by D Ting. This took everyone by surprise. In Nether Prison, everyone knew that D Ting and Nether Puppeteer Patriarch were on good terms. However, the appearance of this scene completely subverted everyone's views. Of course, the most important thing, D Ting was also trying to break through to the God Realm. The beam of light soared into the sky and rushed into the starry sky. It was as if it wanted to feel the guidance of the gods and the coveting of the power of the laws. It was just like the Hell Dog's breakthrough. However, Truth Listener's nomological beam was much weaker than Hell Dog's nomological beam. If Hell Dog's was the bright moon, then Truth Listener's was the glow of a firefly. The thickness was on a completely different level. Perhaps this was due to the difference in their comprehension of the power of the laws. The others didn't quite understand. But when Bufong looked at it, he understood a lot. Although Truth Listener's nomological insights weren't bad, it was a law of light. Such nomological powers could only be considered good among the 3,000 laws in the chaotic universe. Lord Go, on the other hand, comprehended the supreme law. This was the difference in levels. D Ting's eyes were filled with madness. He didn't want to fall behind, because if he did, he would never have another chance. Therefore, he went crazy and risked his life. Even if the price of doing so was too great, he still went all out. The warship Source Stone in Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body was just an ordinary Source Stone. He had wanted to break through with the god's heart. However, time did not allow him to do so. He could only forcefully crush the Source Stone and absorb its surging energy to break through to the God Realm. As for the power he had lost, he could only slowly make up for it after he became a god. And all of this was forced by Bufong. If it weren't for that little chef, D Ting would not have been reduced to a situation where he had to force a breakthrough. Who would have thought that the will of the heavenly Tao would actually be able to crush his incomplete power of laws? Even if it was incomplete, it was still a law. It should always be above the will of the heavenly Tao. Roar! He let out a shrill scream. The energy beams continued to rush into the clouds. It was as if there were waves of air constantly rushing out, dispersing in all directions. The Harken stood rooted to the ground. His gaze kept changing. Mysterious patterns appeared on his body. They were the law of light. It was the nomological power that belonged to D Ting. As Bufong hovered in the sky, everyone on the city wall was dumbfounded. The development of the situation was beyond their expectations. They looked at D Ting, then at the direction of the restaurant. Then they all gasped. Is D Ting also trying to break through to the God Realm? Z was the most shocked. She came from the Empyrean Lady Great World, which was a first-rate great world. She was very knowledgeable. Naturally, he understood where the Harken's madness lay. He had actually forcefully extracted the Origin Stone from his companion's body and crushed it, using it to break through. He was indeed vicious and merciless. However, he was racing against time. He wanted to become a god before that black dog obtained the supreme law's recognition. Only then would he have a chance. But was it possible? Rumble. In the sky, there was a rumbling sound. The entire sky turned dark and gloomy. Black clouds swept out and rumbled incessantly. At this moment, the whole netherworld seemed to be undergoing a great change. All the creatures in the netherworld felt a pressure in their hearts, and they could not help but kneel on the ground. In the Heaven Chief realm, the heaven tree was swaying. Swish, the branches twisted, and soon a figure condensed in front of them. The figure's eyes were fixed in the direction of Earth Prison, and he sighed softly. Nether Prison, in the Nether Chef clan. Puff, a head fell from the neck of a Nether Chef, rolling on the ground. Zhuang's eyes seemed to have blood flowing in them. He twisted his neck, and the muscles on his back bulged. He looked in the direction of Earth Prison, and the corners of his mouth rose. Then, he turned his head and glanced at the Nether Chefs around him. The chef's challenge continues. The loser dies. Bufong stood where he was. An oppressive aura was constantly spreading from Ting. He wants to become a god. Bufong furrowed his brows, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. Ting wanted to become a god, and Bufong could not let him have his way. However, his current state was a little weak, mainly because he had just condensed 4 arrays in the perishing pot, and his divine was almost exhausted. Although he had rested for a long time, with the help of his yin and yang spirit C, his divine will had recovered a lot. However, it would be very difficult for Bufong to use that terrible perishing pot again. His mind flickered. Bufong glanced at the group of people who were watching the show. Then, he opened his mouth and said with an expressionless face, "All of you stay away from here." It was Bufong's kind reminder. The others froze, and their faces changed dramatically. Without the slightest hesitation, all of them got up and ran towards Yellow Spring City. Of course, they would not be stupid enough to ignore Bufong's warning. In fact, some people could guess it. Bufong was going to ruin Ting's breakthrough. Although they wanted to see it, the risk was too great. After everyone had left, Li Qianlon's eyes lit up. On the city wall of Acheron City, only Bufong was left standing with his hands clasped behind his back. The wind howled, and the oppressive aura made Bufong's hair flutter. Bufong's eyes were fixed on Ting, who was shrouded in light. The next moment, with a flip of his hand, a steaming clay pot appeared in his hand. Sword energy was boiling in the pot, and terrible energy was rising and falling. Then Bufong's foot tapped the city wall. It was a loud bang. The city wall exploded. Bufong's figure sped out like a stream of light, and he threw out the crazy sword pot. Buzz, the pot spun, and a surging sword was surged. Finally, in just a flash, it approached Ting. Bufong wanted to ruin Ting's breakthrough. He was not stupid, and he could not watch Ting become a god. Besides, if Ting became a god, he would not let him go. It was like a stream of light. The crazy sword pot approached in a flash. Boom! Without any suspense, the pot hit Ting's body. He was in the middle of breaking through, but in a flash, he was devoured by the surging sword light. Boom! 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 Streaks of sword light rushed over like dragons, bombarding down, and the ground seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The city wall was cut into pieces by the sword energy. The sword energy seemed to turn into a storm, sweeping across the sky. It was a shocking scene. In Acheron City, the people, who had retreated far away, were shocked by the power. They had guessed correctly. Bufong wanted to ruin Ting's breakthrough. However, soon, everyone was disappointed. Even though Bufong had used the strongest move he could for the time being, the crazy sword pot, he still couldn't ruin Ting's breakthrough. The smoke and dust dispersed, and the sword will weakened at the center of the explosion in the cratered ground. Ting was still standing. A beam of light shot up into the sky from his body. Around his body, there were mysterious patterns flowing, and the power of law protected his body from being destroyed. Bufong's eyes suddenly shrank. There was no doubt that if he wanted to destroy it, he had to use the power of law. However, Bufong didn't know anything about the power of law. Rumble in the sky, the aura was getting more and more oppressive. It was as if an unparalleled existence was slowly watching over them. The clouds in the sky changed, turning into a huge vortex. After that, the clouds dispersed, revealing the starry sky. The stars in the sky twinkled in everyone's eyes. All the creatures in Earth Prison were dumbfounded. Looking up at the starry sky, they opened their mouths wide, feeling their insignificance and the vastness of the starry sky. Buzz, suddenly, in the vast starry sky, a beam of light sped away. That beam of light shot out from the star at high speed. It followed Ting's energy beam and kept pouring down. When Z saw this, a look of despair came over her face. It's over. Ting has obtained the approval of a god who has mastered the law of light. I'm afraid he's going to become a god. It was also a breakthrough. Lord Go had broken through before Ting, but it was Ting who had sensed it first. After all, Lord Go had comprehended the law of time. There were very few gods in the starry sky who had comprehended the supreme law of the universe, so it naturally took them a lot of time. Rumble. The beam of light fell from the stars. All the stars seemed to burst forth with boundless radiance, and countless rays of light converged. Countless beams of light gathered on Ting's body. Ting's aura grew stronger and stronger. Finally, with a rumble, he seemed to have broken through the shackles that had been locked on him. His soul was sublimated. Bathed in the light, Ting opened his eyes, which burst out with countless baiguan. He was intoxicated. He was enjoying. The power of law wrapped around his body and kept seeping into it. His aura began to rise at a terrifying rate. Rumble. All of Earth Prison began to tremble. The ground cracked, and huge fissures appeared, as if it could not withstand the pressure, and began to crumble. Ting threw his head back and laughed. The law of light was gradually perfected. Countless complicated runes surrounded his body and circled around him. They gradually shrank and turned into a dazzling white ball of light, about the size of a thumb. It hovered in front of Ting. Slowly, it embedded itself between Ting's brows and sank deep. Finally, it disappeared. It was the complete heart of God. It was the heart of God that was needed to become a true God. The heart of God was the condensation of the power of law, the key to becoming a god. It was the symbol of a god's identity. As long as the heart existed, the god existed. But as the light dimmed, everything was restrained. The energy beam that towered into the sky gradually disappeared. Ting opened his eyes, and the void seemed to collapse and shatter in them. He raised his hand, the corners of his mouth curling up slightly. Finally, his gaze fell on Bufong. His eyes were mocking and mocking. Becoming a god seems faster than me, Ting said. Bufong looked at him, his face expressionless. Then he exhaled softly. In Acheron City, countless people looked in horror at Ting, who was slowly hovering in midair. At this moment, Ting was glowing brightly. Just looking at him made people's hearts palpitate. It's been tens of thousands of years. I've finally reached the realm I've dreamed of, Ting said with emotion. Ting sighed with emotion. I used to be narrow-minded and thought that the Great Saint Realm was the peak. Later, I realized that I was wrong. It wasn't until the battle in the starry sky that I realized that there are stronger gods in this world. Ting's eyes turned and fell on Bufong. Just his gaze alone brought Bufong a terrible pressure. Since then, I've vowed to become a god, so I've been planning and looking for resources. Now my wish has come true. Ting chuckled. He looked up. It landed in Acheron's little restaurant in the distance. There, a beam of light was shining brightly, resonating with the countless existences in the starry sky. As Ting watched, a jealous look came over his face. As expected of the strongest law, unfortunately, you won't have the chance to become a god, Ting said. Then, he slowly walked toward Acheron's little restaurant. Light rose and fell behind him. Bufong frowned. The dragon-bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand, and his knife technique, cutting immortal, slashed down. He wanted to stop Ting. However, in the face of this knife, Ting didn't even dodge and let the knife energy hit him. With a clanging sound, the knife energy collapsed. Ting looked at Bufong with disdain. The gap between a mortal and a god was too great. I am a god. God said, "Let there be light." As soon as his voice rang out, the whole world was as bright as day. A terrible pressure suddenly descended. In Acheron's little restaurant, everyone was shrouded by the divine pressure. They knelt on the ground, shivering. Bufong also took a step back. A pressure as heavy as a mountain suddenly pressed down on his body, almost making him kneel. Suddenly, a creak rang out. In the direction of Acheron's little restaurant, the restaurant's door was pushed open. With a clanging sound, a silver-white puppet slowly walked out. Chapter 1389. I am God, and God said, "Let there be light." Di Ting's mellow voice rang out. At this moment, he was confident of his victory. At first, he felt regretful that he had used the worship source stone to break through to the God realm. However, when he truly felt the power of God, all that was left in his heart was excitement and satisfaction. It turned out that God's power was so powerful. The 9 revolutions' great sage, the perfected great sage. In God's eyes, they were all dust. He could destroy them with a wave of his hand. He enjoyed the power of God, and he even regretted not breaking through earlier to feel this power. It was as if heaven and earth were under his control, and the feeling was incomparably pleasant. Di Ting's body seemed to burst into a dazzling light, which shot into the sky and seemed to envelop the entire earth prison. The light was dazzling and blinding. After comprehending the law of light, Di Ting seemed to have truly become the spokesperson of light. Di Ting closed his eyes. Earth-shaking changes had taken place in his body. His body was much stronger than when he was a demigod. Every cell and every drop of blood seemed to be condensed from light energy. He could no longer be called a body of flesh and blood, but a body of energy. Today, he could be considered immortal and had truly transcended the realm of mortals. His body was indestructible. Even if he lost an arm or a leg, he could regrow it instantly. This was the power of God. Inside his spirit sea, the God's heart floated in the air. The God's heart was condensed from the power of the law. In fact, it was not appropriate to call it the God's heart. The name Heart of God was what Diding had called it. In the instant that he became a god, he understood what this thing that was shining with boundless light was. What was this thing that allowed him to obtain unparalleled power? It was the God core. The God core. The God core floated in his spirit sea. Liquid droplets were constantly condensing around the God core. The power in his body was undergoing earth-shaking changes. His blood was being purified, and so was his energy. In the end, it would turn into a milky white droplet that floated around the God core, nourishing it. This was divine power, the power of God. Soon, his body would be filled with divine power. Di Ting narrowed his eyes, feeling the formidable power in his body. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked at Bufong on the city wall. Bufong slowly straightened his body. He stared coldly at the Harkin. "You're not convinced?" The corners of the Harkin's mouth twitched slightly, and it seemed as if it was a mocking smile. Looking at all the people in Acheron kneeling before him, he could not help but chuckle. He flicked his finger. Instantly, a ball-shaped baiguang shot toward Bufong. In an instant, the light intensified. "Binding of light." The Harkin replied calmly. As the light grew brighter, Bufong's pupil shrank. The next moment, Bufong discovered that he was enveloped by a pillar of light. Bufong furrowed his brows. He spun the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand and fiercely smashed the light pillar. However, a clanging sound rang out, and he was unable to break it. "You cannot defy the power of God," Di Ting said calmly. "Be a good boy and stay here. When I help Earth Prison Dog cut off the connection with the laws of the universe, I will deal with you." Di Ting, who looked like a little boy, chuckled mischievously. The next moment, he turned into a beam of light and sped toward the restaurant in the distance. He fixed his eyes on Di Ting's figure. Suddenly, Bufong froze. Then, he saw a beam of silver light shoot up into the sky from the restaurant. In the sky, a burly figure floated in the air. With a clanging sound, its metal wings spread. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as he stared at Di Ting. Di Ting stared at Xiao Bai, his eyes suddenly bursting with endless ferocity. You puppet! How dare you show up? You ate my god's heart. How dare you come out? As soon as Di Ting saw Xiao Bai, he remembered the god's heart that Xiao Bai had eaten. Even with the state of mind that had become a god, he was still shocked. He was furious. Boom! Di Ting flicked his finger. A binding of light immediately shot out. After becoming a god, one would comprehend a divine skill. Naturally, he had comprehended a divine skill that belonged to him. Xiao Bai hovered in the sky. After devouring the god's heart for so long, he had finally digested it. His white body turned silver, which made him look even more coquettish. The metal wings on his back clanged. A moment later, they began to twist, gradually turning into a long spear. That long spear was pitch black, covered with patterns. Carried on Xiao Bai's back, it looked like it was born from the primal chaos. Facing Di Ting's binding of light, Xiao Bai's fan-like palm suddenly rose, grabbing the long spear on his back. Then, he threw it at the ball of light. Boom! An explosion rang out. Xiao Bai's body was sent flying backward. He tumbled in the air, causing the void to explode. Countless turbulent space currents appeared, hitting him. Your puppet, after fusing with my god's heart, it's much stronger. Di Ting's eyes were cold, his murderous intent surging. Xiao Bai flipped to his feet. Buzz! A clanging sound rang out behind him again. Then flags emerged behind Xiao Bai. When the flag was unfurled, it flapped noisily in the wind, making Whitey look even more valiant and formidable. You fuse more thoroughly than Nether Puppeteer. Unfortunately, the god's heart is broken. If you had fused with the complete god's heart, you might have been able to become a god. Unfortunately, in my eyes, you're just a pile of scrap metal. Di Ting said coldly. He flicked his finger again. 2 more Baiguang beams shot out, flying toward Xiao Bai in the sky. On the city wall, Bufong furrowed his brows. The god's heart should be the source stone Xiao Bai had obtained from Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body. He didn't expect that it would give Xiao Bai such a huge breakthrough. In terms of fighting prowess alone, Xiao Bai had reached the level of a demigod. Unfortunately, Di Ting had become a god. There was only a difference of 1 word between a demigod and a god, but the level of their power was worlds apart. Bufong could feel it clearly. He couldn't stay here. Bufong took a deep breath. The next moment, the look in Bufong's eyes changed. Buzz Bufong's eyes rolled. Then, his black hair turned white at a speed visible to the naked eye. Bufong, who was lying on a light beam, straightened his body, and the corners of his mouth curved upward. A god? Ha! In my eyes, they're all trash. White-haired Bufong said arrogantly. As soon as his voice rang out, all the people on the city wall were struck dumb. Ah Z, kneeling on the ground, was even more dumbfounded. A god is trash? Where did his confidence come from? White-haired Bufong reached out his hand, squeezing it. Feeling the power in his body, he nodded in satisfaction. The little host's power was getting stronger, and the power he could exert was also stronger. Raising his head, his sword-like eyes stared at Di Ting, who was hovering in the distance with a halo behind him. His mind flickered. Immediately, the white tiger heaven stove appeared at his side. It opened its mouth and roared like a tiger's head. Holding the white tiger heaven stove, white-haired Bufong smashed it at the binding of light. Boom! If 1 strike didn't work, then 2 strikes after 2 strikes, the light beam was smashed. It turned into scattered light, drifting in the air. White-haired Bufong's long white hair fluttered. Against the scattered light spots, he looked like a banished immortal. Of course, if he didn't carry a stove, he would look more like one. Holding the stove, white-haired Bufong raised his chin, grinning, revealing his canine teeth. Then, the stove he was holding was flung away. Boom! The heavy stove weighed tens of thousands of pounds. In an instant, it was thrown out, smashing toward Di Ting's back. However, after Di Ting became a god, his divine sense became more perfect. Turning around, he flicked his finger, and a circle of light spread out. The circle of light shrouded him. turning into a thick barrier of light. The stove hit the barrier, but it was not damaged at all. "Don't you admit that you're weak?" Ting said coldly, looking at white-haired Bufong. White-haired Bufong raised his chin, looking cold and disdainful. "In my eyes, a god like you is nothing but trash." As his voice rang out in the distance, Xiao Bai made his move. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes bloomed with thousands of divine lights. There was a loud bang. A flag flew out from behind him. With a ripping sound, it fell from the sky and stuck behind Ting. As the flag stuck in the void, it caused the void to crack. Ting's eyes turned, locking on Xiao Bai. He waved his hand. Light obliteration. A huge round ball of light flew out. The ball of light smashed into where Whitey was and exploded with a loud bang. The entire void suddenly twisted and disappeared, leaving only the violent void turbulence. Roar! It was like a dragon's roar. Xiao Bai stabbed out with a spear. He stabbed at the flag. In an instant, the distance of 1,000 miles was shortened in an instant. The flag seemed to be a fixed point. Xiao Bai flew past like a silver dragon. Passing through Ting's body, he raised the flag. Boom! The attack hit Ting's barrier of light, but it did not break the barrier. However, Ting's body was hit by an irresistible force and sent flying into the sky. The moment it was sent flying, its body could not move. Ting himself was stunned. The corner of white-haired Bufong's mouth twitched. Iron lump. Well done. Roar. 3,000 white hairs instantly expanded. Behind Bufong, an energy white tiger emerged. The white tiger suddenly pounced toward Ting. Wherever it passed, the void cracked inch by inch. The people in Acheron City were stunned. No one had thought that the owner of Acheron's little store would be so domineering. He wanted to kill a god in broad daylight. Roar! The tiger's roar shook the sky. Ting recovered from the dizziness of being sent flying, and his eyes shrank. "How dare you?" he bellowed. The power of the law lingered in his palm. The next moment, he slapped at the blue wave white tiger. A straight beam of light shot out from Ting's palm, instantly piercing through the blue wave white tiger, causing it to collapse in the void. White-haired Bufong landed and staggered back a few steps. With each step, the city wall collapsed. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed again. He did not retreat at all. Boom! Boom! 3 flags fell in a row. However, this time, Ting would not be hit again. Ting was almost crazy. He, who had become a god, was hit by a puppet. This was a humiliation to him. The power of the law shrouded him. Another beam of light shot out of his palm. It flew toward Xiao Bai. There was a loud bang. Xiao Bai blocked it with his spear, but he was instantly knocked away. His body flew out of Acheron City like a cannonball and smashed into the ground outside, creating many craters. However, he was unscathed. He flipped over and soared into the sky again. Swoosh! White-haired Bufong's white hair receded, and Bufong returned to his indifferent appearance. Looking at Ting, who was flustered and exasperated in the sky, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Those who insult a god must die. Ting's eyes were filled with killing intent as he fixed them on Bufong. However, the disdainful smile on Bufong's face made him even crazier. "Well, it's too late," Bufong said, looking at Ting playfully. Ting's pupils constricted when he heard that. Then, he turned his head and looked in the direction of Acheron's little store. There, the beam of light connected the starry sky and the universe. From the boundless universe, a white beam of light shot over. Just like Ting's breakthrough. In the chaotic universe, a god who had mastered the supreme law of time had finally responded. Boom! A milky white beam of light fell from the sky. In a flash, it crashed into Acheron's little store. A terrible light exploded, surging and surging. Ting sucked in a cold breath, his pupils constricting. A creaking sound rang out. Inside Acheron's little store, an enchanting black dog, strutting its cat-like steps, slowly walked out. Time seemed to be flowing in the black dog's eyes, and the years seemed to be drifting. Then, It looked up mockingly at the insufferably arrogant Harkin that hovered in the sky. Chapter 1390. Lord Go had come out of seclusion. Because the breakthrough came so suddenly, Lord Go was not prepared for it. After all, he did not expect that a dish could help him break through to the god realm. Bufong Boy's dishes are getting more and more amazing. Lord Go stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Feeling the lingering aroma in his mouth, he could not help but narrow his eyes. After breaking through to the god realm, Lord Go did not first sense the sublimated power in his body. Instead, he savored the aroma in his mouth. Rumble, a terrible rumble rang out in the sky. Ting and Earth Prison Dog could not help but raise their heads and look at the sky. Immediately, they saw the terrible pressure sweeping down from the sky. Slowly, a golden wheel emerged in the starry sky, which seemed to be born out of chaos. Countless thunderbolts flashed in the wheel. The thunderbolts were colorful: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, and all kinds of colors. Every time they flashed, the wheel would spin. The void kept crumbling under the wheel's pressure. It was terrible. It was an extremely terrible power. At this moment, the whole Earth Prison, or rather, the whole Netherworld, was enveloped in fear. What is this? Ting sucked in a cold breath and looked incredulously at the wheel in the sky. The wheel was spinning, bursting with countless streams of light. It was a pressure that acted on his mind, a power that made his heart throb. A divine tribulation. Ozzy took a deep breath and spat out in a daze. It was as if she was answering Ting's question. A divine tribulation was a god's thunder tribulation. To become a god, one naturally had to be baptized by lightning punishment. However, not every existence who broke through to the god realm could transcend a divine tribulation. Once they did, they would comprehend a divine power. Therefore, a divine tribulation was a tribulation that only top geniuses were qualified to transcend. A divine power was different from a divine skill. When Ting became a god, he comprehended a divine skill, so he did not trigger a divine tribulation. However, once this black dog transcended the divine tribulation and comprehended a divine power, it would be one of the few gods in the divine dynasty. Is this dog a freak? Z was a little confused. Lord Go twitched his nose, glanced at the golden wheel in the sky, and let out a sigh. Then, he seemed to notice Ting's surprise, and he raised his brows slightly. It's the god's tribulation, the god's tribulation. Why, didn't you? Lord Go asked calmly. The Harkin. Was this the difference between them? Ting took a deep breath, and a hint of fear surged in its eyes. There was no chance. This hell dog had successfully broken through to become a deity. He no longer had any chance to stop him. The power of the laws of the great netherworld would be drawn by this dog. Ting's heart was filled with bitterness. There were only so many laws and resources in the great netherworld, and now that they were all taken by this dog, he would have nothing left. Unreconciled, Ting gritted its teeth and glared at Lord Go resentfully. But most of them were still looking at Bufong and Xiaobai. It was mainly because these two fellows were holding him back. Otherwise, if he destroyed Earth Prison Dog's breakthrough, then Earth Prison Dog would not be able to become a god. As long as he could not become a god, all the laws and resources of the great netherworld would belong to him. Ting took a deep breath. All he could do now was to take away all the laws and resources of the great netherworld while this Earth Prison Dog was about to transcend his tribulation. He would take as much as he could. If he was too late, there would be nothing left. After all, the resources of the great netherworld were only enough to feed one god. Ting floated in the air, and soon his body burst into a brilliant light. He wanted to escape. He wanted to escape and plunder all the resources. But could he escape? Lord Go turned his eyes and rested them on Ting. When he saw that Ting was about to turn and run, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. You want to run after showing off? Lord Go said. Before the voice faded, it had not dissipated. Suddenly, Lord Go appeared at Ting's side. Oh, Ting's pupils constricted, and the fat on his boyish face kept jiggling. How can you be so fast? Didn't you comprehend the law of time? Ting sucked in a cold breath. He did not expect that Earth Prison Dog would appear at his side so soon. Are you stupid? I paused time, walked like a cat, and tidied up my shiny black fur in front of you. You just didn't see it. Lord Go rolled his eyes. Pause time? What was going on? Time could not be paused. Ting felt as if his heart was being grabbed by a big hand, and it was extremely cold. The supreme law of the universe was indeed terrifying. Rumble. In the sky, the golden wheel of law surged, and thunder rumbled, which seemed to affect both the body and the soul at the same time. It was incomparably frightening. You should go and transcend your tribulation now. Otherwise, you won't be able to consolidate your cultivation base. Ting awkwardly plastered a gentle and polite smile on his face. However, Lord Go shook his head. There's no hurry. Did you bully my people just now? Lord Go slowly raised his exquisite paw and hovered in front of Ting. No, I was just passing by. Ting was almost crying. He squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. Bam! However, as soon as he finished speaking, the exquisite dog paw descended. With a rumble, the void exploded. Half of Ting's head exploded. His body fell outside Acheron City, and the ground outside Acheron City collapsed again, forming a deep pit. The whole Acheron City rose abruptly as if it had turned into a towering cliff. Ting crawled up from the ruins, terrified. Earth Prison Dog's power of law terrified him. That was the supreme law of the universe, and before it, his law of light was as fragile as a baby. Was the gap between their laws really that great? Half of Ting's had exploded, but now that he had become a god, his recovery ability was extremely strong. Countless streams of energy gathered, and in a short time, Ting's head was restored to its original state. Lord Go hovered in the sky, emanating a terrible divine might. He looked down at Ting, seeing Ting recover. Then he opened his mouth and barked. The dog barked. Everything around him seemed to have stopped. Even the flying rubble floated in the air and stopped falling. Lord Dog walked with graceful cat-like steps, slowly descending from the sky. Step by step, he descended from the sky, twisting his fat butt. He came in front of Ting. Buzz the pause ended. Crash! Rubble fell to the ground with a rumble. Everyone on the city wall was in an uproar. Ting's eyes widened. However, Lord Go didn't give him a chance to speak. He swung his paw again. With a bang, he smashed Ting to the ground again. Boom! 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 The ground trembled, and an abyss appeared in front of Acheron City. Ting, on the other hand, seemed to be rubbed against the ground by Lord Go and dragged into the abyss. After everyone had gone numb, in the abyss, Lord Go's figure slowly floated up. His doggy paw was clutching the dim truth listener. With a thud, Ting was thrown to the ground like a dead dog, kicking up a cloud of dust. At this moment, Lord Go finally had the intention to face the golden wheel of law in the sky. From it, Lord Go felt an extremely terrible pressure. Lie down. I'll settle the score with you later. Lord Go patted Ting's head with his paw. Ting, on the other hand, had long lost the strength to fight back. What the F***? Earth Prison Dog comprehended the law of time, which was unreasonably domineering. For the first time, Ting felt despair. Even though he had become a god, he still felt despair. He knew there would be a gap between them, but he didn't expect it to be so big. They were both gods. Boom. There was a loud explosion. Lord Go soared into the sky, twisted his dog butt, and rushed into the golden wheel of law with cat-like steps. Boom! Bolts of lightning fell from the sky. Golden lightning, blue lightning, red lightning, all kinds of thunderbolts crashed down from the golden wheel, as if they were going to destroy everything. It was too terrifying. Everyone in Acheron City was as silent as cicadas in winter, trembling, not daring to move at all. Bufong, on the other hand, was very calm. He drank the 9 Revolution Great Path tea and ate the oyster pancake, quickly recovering. Boom, boom, boom. Thunder rumbled in the sky. It was accompanied by the sound of the golden wheel turning and the barking of a dog. It was extremely noisy, disturbing one's mood. Xiaobai had returned to his chubby appearance, and the spear and the flag behind him had disappeared. He stroked his bald head and stood at Bufang's side. Xiaobai, do you want an oyster pancake? Bufang glanced at Xiaobai and grinned. Xiaobai's mechanical eyes flashed. Then, he raised his huge palm and pushed it forward. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Xiao Chun took a big bite of the steaming oyster pancake. The plump oyster pancake was sucked into his mouth. It didn't take long for him to transcend the tribulation. After a long time, Lord Go descended from the sky. He walked with graceful cat-like steps. Of course, if he looked elegant, it would be perfect. Unfortunately, Lord Go, who had just finished transcending the tribulation, was scorched by the thunder wheel of law. Even his dog fur was split open. Of course, he was already black, so it was not obvious, but the tribulation was over. A milky white halo fell from the golden wheel of law and enveloped Lord Go's body. Lord Go narrowed his eyes as if he was taking a bath. He raised his limbs as if he was flying, and his tail kept wagging from side to side. On the ground, Di Ting was extremely envious. Everyone in Acheron City looked at this scene with reverence. This was Lord Go comprehending the divine power and condensing the divine core. After transcending the tribulation, Lord Go became a god at this moment. Buzz, the milky white halo disappeared. The golden wheel of law rotated as if a supreme being was saying something. The sound was deafening, and when it fell into everyone's ears, there was only a buzzing sound. In the end, everything dissipated, and everything returned to normal. Lord Go was still Lord Go, an extraordinary dog. However, if one looked closely, they would find that there seemed to be mysterious runes of law flowing in Lord Go's eyes. Di Ting raised his head and looked at the black dog. Suddenly, time froze. The next moment, Lord Go appeared at his side. Do you want to know what divine power Lord Go has just comprehended? Lord Go looked at Di Ting, his magnetic voice ringing out. No, I don't want to. Di Ting shook his head in horror. A god who had comprehended a divine power was much stronger than an ordinary god like him. It was better for him not to court death. Lord Go twitched his mouth. I wanted to kill you with one paw, but I remembered that you are now the leader of the great netherworld. If you die, the great netherworld will become a masterless great world, and the divine dynasty will send someone to take over. So, Lord Go will spare your life. But I can spare you the death penalty, but I won't forgive you. You must pay the price for bullying my people. After saying that, Lord Go raised his exquisite paw. His eyes became deep in an instant. Buzz countless runes of law swirled and finally turned into a plum-shaped paw print. He slapped it hard. The paw print plunged into Di Ting's spirit sea and slapped hard on his divine core. Slash! Di Ting coughed up a mouthful of blood. All he could see was darkness in front of him. Lord Go seemed very satisfied with his masterpiece. This is the time seal I, Lord Go, left in your body. From now on, you are my god slave. If you dare to betray me, the time seal will naturally break out, and you will age until you are past your prime in one day. It will be very miserable. Chapter 1391. Time Seal. Lord Go's words stunned Di Ting. His blood-stained face revealed a look of horror. Naturally, the Harkin had no idea what the Ionic Seal was, but it sounded like something incredible. To be able to turn him past his prime and die of old age in a single day, it was a terrifying technique. The Law of Time really lived up to its reputation. Di Ting shuddered. They were both gods, but why was the gap between them so huge? He could sense the endless pressure coming from the Hell Dog's body. It was a kind of pressure that affected his soul so much so that he could hardly breathe. It was a painful feeling. Di Ting's divine sense wrapped around his god core. Inside the surging divine power was a blazing white god core, but there was a dog paw print in the shape of a plum blossom on it. The paw print constantly exuded the aura of the law of time, like maggots on a tarsal bone, constantly exuding nightmarish terror. Was this the mark Earth Prison Dog had left on his god core? After breaking through and becoming a god core was of utmost importance. Only with a god core could one be considered a god. Even if one's body was completely destroyed, one could still be resurrected with a god core. But now this damned Earth Prison Dog had left an exquisite paw print on his god core. It was like a nightmare. You can't. Hellhound, you can't do this to me. The Harkin had gone mad, and it roared with fury. He had transformed into a little boy, but his chubby face was filled with ferocity and despair. Lord Go gave him a sideways glance. Then, he raised his paw and slapped the boy on the head. Thud! D-Ting's body fell hard to the ground. You're lucky I didn't kill you. How dare you bark? Lord Go's chubby body trembled. Everyone looked at each other, speechless, not knowing what to say. A noisy battle between gods had ended just like that. D-Ting was too weak. Everyone in Acheron City looked at each other. However, only D-Ting knew the truth. It was the suppression of the laws. The suppression of the Lord Go's laws was simply too strong. He was so strong that he almost fell into despair. Compared to his ordinary laws, a supreme law of the universe was like a mortal facing an emperor. He couldn't even lift his head, let alone resist. After being slapped a few times, D-Ting stopped talking. Blood spurted out of his mouth and nose as he gasped for breath. He knew that the truth was set in stone, and he was powerless to resist. Truth listener couldn't help but feel sorrowful in its heart. He was the strongest patriarch of Nether Prison, the leader of the entire great Netherworld, and in existence who had become a god. How could he yield to a dog? This was a humiliation. The Harkin was indignant. It squeezed its eyes and shed tears of grievance. Bang! The claw suddenly landed, and Truth Listener's tears gushed out as its body slammed into the ground again. Just like that, a great battle came to an end. It was over. Everyone in Yellow Spring City breathed a deep sigh of relief. That was the oppression of the two gods. If Truth Listener won, it would be a disaster for Hell. Fortunately, the one who won was the Hell Dog. It was late at night. In Acheron's little shop, the ruins of Acheron City had been repaired. After all, there were many experts in the city with strong cultivation bases. They couldn't beat D-Ting, but it was easy for them to clean up the ruins. Moonlight sprinkled down from the sky. It projected onto the ground of Hell, covering Hell with a white veil. The lights in Acheron's little shop were brightly lit. Bufong was curled up in a chair, holding a cup of tea in his hand. His eyes were closed, and he was lost in thought. At this moment, the system's solemn voice resounded in his mind. As for Xiaobai, he stood quietly next to Bufong. You held little Hu in your arms, looking bored. Under the Path Understanding tree, Lord Go lay lazily on the ground. D-Ting had turned into a short-legged dog, lying lifelessly to one side. A dog leash was tied around his neck, and tears of grievance were welling up in his eyes from time to time. He was the lord of the Netherworld, but he was tied up by a dog leash. It was a disgrace. Tian Song, on the other hand, was standing in front of the counter, carefully wiping a blue and white porcelain bowl with a white cloth. The atmosphere in the restaurant was harmonious. Bufong calmed his mind and read the system panel. Host, Bufong True Energy Cultivation Base, 9 Revolution Great Sage Realm Cooking Talent, 9 Star Skills. Level 2 Meteor Knife Skill, 100 out of 100. Level 2 Big Dipper Carving Technique, 100 out of 100. Level 1 Knife Skill. Overlord 13 Blades, 13 out of 13. Gourmet Array, 5 out of 6. Cutting Immortal Style, 3 out of 3 items. Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, God of Cooking Set. Black Turtle Constellation Wok, God of Cooking Set. Vermilion Chef Robe, God of Cooking Set. White Tiger Heaven Stove, God of Cooking Set. God of Cooking Comprehensive Rating. Elementary Divine Chef, beginning to comprehend the laws and try to fuse them with ingredients. The food cooked has a magical effect and caused a sensation. System level. Level 5. Helping host embark on the path to becoming the god of cooking. System reward. 1 fragment of the god of cooking set. One fruit of La Bufong fell silent and carefully read the system panel. It was not easy to break through this time. It took Bufong 9 years to earn enough revenue. Moreover, the breakthrough was made with the dishes in the God of Cooking's menu. It was very dangerous. However, the reward for the breakthrough disappointed Bufong. Bufong knew that there was one fragment of the God of Cooking set. However, Bufong thought he could collect 2 fragments, but it turned out that there was only one. There was another reward, the Fruit of Law. What's that? It's not a reward for a dish this time. Perhaps it was because the expectations were too high, so the psychological gap was also high. He didn't expect the reward for breaking through to the great sage to be so simple. Originally, Bufong thought that the rewards this time would be very generous. He withdrew his consciousness. Bufong opened his eyes and looked at the light on the ceiling. His eyes were a little blurred. Bufong could feel that he was getting closer and closer to becoming the God of Cooking. The Lord Go had become a god, although this kind of god should be different from the God of Cooking that the system mentioned. After all, he had stepped into the realm of gods. As long as he came into contact with gods, it meant that Bufong should not be far from becoming the God of Cooking. And the true tribulation that the artifact spirits spoke of should be approaching soon. He focused his mind. He floated in his spirit's sea, where a whirlpool was constantly spinning. Bufong emerged. The artifact spirits swayed. After greeting the artifact spirits, Bufong looked at the God of Cooking's menu over his head. The golden God of Cooking's menu turned a page, and 3 divine power liquid drops emerged on again. As Bufong looked at them, his eyes lit up slightly. Perhaps these divine power liquid drops were the best reward. By now, Bufong also understood the importance of the divine power liquid drops. After all, according to the Lord Go, they were condensed from the divine core and belonged to the power of gods. They contained unparalleled power. Although they did not contain the power of the law, they were extraordinary. When Bufong rashly used 2 divine power liquid drops, he did not care about the artifact spirit's heartache. Now, it seemed that the artifact spirit's heartache was justified. He just didn't know if the divine power liquid drops here were the real divine power liquid drops of the God of Cooking. If they were, he might be able to pry into the God of Cooking's secrets from them. That was what Bufong thought. However, he was mercilessly struck by the artifact spirits. Little host, you're dreaming. The divine power liquid drops are only the embodiment of a god's power. You can't sense the power of the law from them unless you can get the divine core. Divine Dragon swayed his body and said to Bufong with a smile. What he said was a fact. The other artifact spirits did not refute him. Bufong glanced at the Divine Dragon, but he didn't say anything. Then the Black Turtle spoke. A rumbling voice rang through the whole spirit sea. Little host, you must remember that the path you are taking is a difficult one. You're going to become an existence standing at the top of the food chain. The Black Turtle's voice was very serious, ringing in Bufong's ears like a morning bell. Bufong nodded thoughtfully. He glanced at the God of Cooking's menu again. Perhaps every time he turned a page, 3 divine power liquid drops would appear. If he used each divine power liquid drop with all his might, it would probably allow him to unleash endless power for an hour. However, for a true powerhouse, an hour was more than enough. His mind withdrew. Bufong exhaled softly. He stood up from a chair and stretched his back. No matter what, Bufong's main goal now was to run the restaurant well, earn more nether and immortal crystals, and complete the turnover. He clasped his hands behind his back. Bufong walked slowly. As he passed by the Path Understanding tree, he glanced at Di Ting, who had nothing left to live for. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Di Ting seemed to feel Bufong's gaze. He gave Bufong a cold sideways glance. However, as soon as he did so, the Lord Go kicked him in the head. Di Ting went crazy. He wanted to resist. However, as soon as he got up, the Lord Go raised his exquisite dog paw at him. Looking at the delicate dog paw, Di Ting was terrified. Tears of humiliation flowed from his eyes as he lay down once more. The corners of Bufong's mouth curled up slightly. Then, He lifted the curtain of the kitchen and stepped into the kitchen with the ringing of a bell. No matter what, cooking was fundamental. No matter how strong his cultivation was, he couldn't forget about his culinary skills. Under the moonlight, blood splattered everywhere. Rivers of blood flowed in the Nether Chef clan. The Nether Chefs died with everlasting regret. Their eyes were wide and filled with madness. The land of the Nether Chef clan was filled with the smell of blood. The flames in the stoves had not been extinguished, and plumes of smoke were still billowing. However, all that remained was a deathly silence. In the void, Nether Chef Patriarch's eyes were filled with disbelief. He raised his head and stared at the burly figure in the distance, his eyes full of despair. "You?" Nether Chef Patriarch's heart trembled. It never occurred to him that when he returned from Earth Prison, his clan's land had turned into a land of death. Why? Why was that? However, when he saw the burly figure, he understood everything. Zhuang slowly turned around, his body shrouded in a terrible aura. His eyes were so deep that they seemed to be projected from the depths of the universe. "You have betrayed God. Now you will receive God's punishment," Zhuang said with a strange smile on his face. Nether Chef Patriarch's body kept shaking. Looking at the dead Nether Chef clan, he let out a sorrowful roar. His aura kept rising. The cultivation base of the 9 Revolution Great Sage was displayed to the fullest. "I don't care if you are a god or a human. I, the Nether Chef Patriarch, will fight you to the death for destroying my Nether Chef clan." Nether Chef Patriarch roared wildly. The next moment, he flew toward Zhuang like a madman with a kitchen knife in his hand. His speed was extremely fast, and his anger had caused his cultivation base to erupt completely. His eyes were full of killing intent. All the Nether Chefs of the Nether Chef clan were dead. At this moment, the prosperous Nether Chef clan had fallen into a dead silence. Such a grudge would not end until one of them was dead. Zhuang grinned. He looked at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, who kept approaching. The next moment, he raised his hand and pointed a finger forward. Buzzed countless runes of Lost World. Finally, they exploded and enveloped Nether Chef Patriarch. "Do you want revenge? Do you want to kill me? I can give you a chance." Zhuang's eyes were strange, and his words were like a nightmare, full of confusion. Nether Chef Patriarch rushed into the runes of law. For a moment, his eyes were blank. "If you want to kill me, then fight me in a chef's challenge. As long as you defeat me, you can kill me." Zhuang reached out a hand and gently patted Nether Chef Patriarch's face. "In the name of the god of Chef's challenge, you have forgotten." Chapter 1392. A loud yawn resounded through the restaurant, attracting the attention of all the people waiting in line. Everyone squinted and looked over. Then they saw a fat black dog lying under the path understanding tree. The black dog opened its mouth, its tongue curled out, and its eyes were half closed. There seemed to be tears in them. They were the tears of yawning. Next to the black dog was a striped yellow and white dog with short legs. He covered his face with his paws, not wanting others to see him. Obviously, staying with this earth prison dog, who had no regard for his image, made him uncomfortable. Lord Go yawned, lay back down, and went back to sleep. The only difference between the Lord Go and the one before he became a god was that he had a yellow and white dog by his side. Other than that, nothing had changed. He still loved to sleep and eat Bufong's sweet and sour ribs every day. However, this kind of life was exactly what Lord Go liked. The path understanding tree swayed, and the patterns on it kept moving as if there was a strong intent spreading out of it. Lord Go lay in front of the path understanding tree, causing it to change. Lord Go's power of the law seemed to seep into the tree. Buzz, the intent spreading out of the path understanding tree, was no longer an ordinary comprehension, but a comprehension of the power of the law. Although it was very weak, even a little bit was like a treasure to an ordinary great sage. This also made the restaurant more and more popular. Countless experts in Earth Prison swarmed toward Acheron's little restaurant. The battle between the gods had long since spread throughout the infernal realm. Yellow Springs City had protruded, and a bottomless abyss had been created outside the city. All of this had spread throughout the infernal realm like a legend. Even in the netherworld, the legend had spread. Of course, the patriarchs of the 9 nether prison clans would not allow such a thing to happen, so they all took action to suppress the spread of the legend. After all, Di Ting, the lord of the netherworld, was captured by Earth Prison Dog, which was not a glorious thing. Outside Hell Acheron's little store, a large number of experts were sitting cross-legged. Among them were the great sage, the little saint, and even the toddlers who had just learned how to walk. They all sat cross-legged outside the restaurant, feeling the essence of the path understanding tree emanating from the restaurant. The deeper they went, the more powerful existences they could see. For example, Hades' era, Lord Inglong, Great Sage Acheron, and so on. Every single one of these experts had a reputation that resounded like thunder in the ears of hell. Azi carried the baby dragon and came to the restaurant every day to eat delicious food. Ever since Azi ate Bufong's dishes, she had fallen into a frenzy. She'd settled down in Nether Spring City a long time ago. Acheron City was such a good place, it would be a waste if she didn't stay. She couldn't foolishly leave Acheron City with the little dragon. Time passed. Apart from the fact that Acheron's little store in Acheron City had become famous, there was also a piece of news that made everyone's hair stand on end spreading throughout the netherworld. The Nether Chef clan of the 9 clans in Nether Prison has been wiped out. The news came from Nether Prison and swept across the netherworld like a storm. Whether it was Nether Prison, Earth Prison, or the surrounding small worlds such as the Vajra realm, they were all shocked. That was one of the 9 clans in Nether Prison. How could they be wiped out? Who could believe such a thing? Unless the god intervened. How could he wipe out the Nether Chef clan? And it was done silently. When people found out, the land of the Nether Chef clan was littered with corpses and blood. Some people even saw the Nether Chef patriarch kneeling in the ancestral land, his head gone. This scene spread throughout the entire netherworld. Everyone who saw it felt their hair stand on end. Naturally, the news also reached Earth Prison. As a place to eat, the restaurant naturally had a chat. Ting dong. The curtain of the kitchen was lifted. Bufong walked out with a dish in his hand. He slowly walked to a table and placed the dish on it. The diners at this table were experts from several top aristocratic families in Earth Prison. They were talking to each other, their faces filled with lingering fear. After Bufong placed the dish in front of them, they all smiled at Bufong. Who dared to provoke Acheron's little restaurant nowadays? As for owner Bu, he naturally had enough respect for him. Bufong nodded expressionlessly. Then, he turned and was about to return to the kitchen. It's too tragic. That scene came from Nether Prison. Tens of thousands of people in the Nether Chef clan were all killed. Blood flowed like rivers. Corpses were strewn everywhere, and a dark haze hung over the world, lingering for a long time. According to my uncle who stays in Nether Prison, there are ghosts wailing in the sky above the Nether Chef clan. Those are the remnant souls of the Nether Chef clan. The diners were talking to each other. Bufong's steps came to a halt. He was a little puzzled. Normally, he wouldn't be interested in this kind of news. However, since it involved the Nether Chefs, Bufong had to be serious. The Nether Chef clan was annihilated? Why the Nether Chef clan? Why the Chef clan was annihilated? Bufong frowned as he thought to himself. He had planned to visit the Nether Chef clan when he had time. After all, it was a clan with 10,000 years of inheritance, and they might have some profound cooking skills. Bufong went there with the intention of learning. However, before he could go, the Nether Chef clan was annihilated. Bufong walked slowly, frowning as he listened to the things they were discussing. However, he didn't hear anything. Then, Bufong turned and went into the kitchen to continue cooking. It was late at night. The restaurant was closed. In the kitchen, Bufong had finished cooking. The rich aroma of sweet and sour ribs filled the air, lingering above the restaurant. "Blackie, it's time to eat." Bufong walked out of the kitchen and said softly, under the path understanding tree. Lord Go, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly woke up. His eyes widened, and he stuck out his tongue in excitement. Today, Buffon's cooking skills were superb, and the food he cooked was incomparably delicious. A plate of sweet and sour ribs almost made Lord Ghost swallow his own tongue. Di Ting, who was lying lifelessly on the ground, also became spirited. It jumped up, its eyes wide. "Is there something to eat?" Buffon placed a bowl full of sweet and sour dragon ribs in front of Lord Go. He glanced at the Harkin and sighed softly. Di Ting was also a poor dog, so he found a small porcelain bowl, picked a few pieces of sweet and sour ribs from Lord Go's plate, and placed it in front of Di Ting. Di Ting was so moved that he almost cried. "This little chef is a good man." Buffon glanced at him, stood up, walked into the kitchen, and continued to bring out new dishes. Tonight's dish was spicy blood lobster. The fragrance of sweet and sour ribs was incomparably rich. It slowly lingered as if it had turned solid, spinning in the air. Then it collapsed and dissipated. Di Ting sniffed deeply, his nose twitching. Immediately, the fragrance burrowed into his nose, making him deeply infatuated. "It smells so good." Di Ting was satisfied. However, just as he was bursting with joy, a sharp look shot at him from the side. The look was like a sharp arrow, piercing Di Ting's heart in an instant. "Ew, what are you doing?" Di Ting's fur stood on end, and he became very vigilant. "This is my sweet and sour ribs," Di Ting said, hurriedly stretching out his short legs and pulling the plate to his side. Lord Go sneered, and his fat seemed to jiggle. Di Ting had a bad feeling as he watched. It was an extremely bad feeling. "Your sweet and sour ribs?" Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice rang out. However, the voice made Di Ting tremble all over. "That's Lord Go's. My sweet and sour ribs are all Lord Go's." Lord Go grinned, revealing his white teeth. Shameless. Di Ting wanted to cry, but had no tears. He knew this mangy dog would never let go of his sweet and sour ribs. The fragrant sweet and sour ribs. The sweet and sour ribs. The sweet and sour ribs that he had tasted once. The sweet and sour ribs that he would never forget. He had to stay away from him again. "You are my god slave. Your sweet and sour ribs is my sweet and sour ribs, and my sweet and sour ribs is still my sweet and sour ribs. Understand?" Lord Go said to Di Ting, rolling up a piece of fragrant sweet and sour ribs with his tongue, putting it into his mouth and chewing. Di Ting was filled with grief and indignation. Watching the sweet and sour ribs on his plate disappear piece by piece, he felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. "You mangy dog! You won't find a female dog if you're so shameless." Di Ting's whole body was trembling, and even his hair was trembling. Ha! However, such a vicious curse was nothing to Lord Go. "Sweet and sour ribs is enough for me in this life. Why do I need a female dog?" Lord Go said. What else could he, the Harkin, say in response to such shameless words? He was also desperate. In the end, there was only a small piece of sweet and sour ribs stained with sauce left on the blue and white porcelain plate. Di Ting wanted to cry, but had no tears. No one bullied a dog like this. Night fell. Buffon walked out of the restaurant. He gently closed the door of the restaurant. Creak. Nethery followed at his side, holding Foxy in her arms and blinking her eyes at him. Buffon obviously didn't expect you to follow him. He looked at the ladder and met her eyes. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he rubbed the ladder's head. Then, he tore the void and stepped into it. You followed closely behind him. The current Buffon, at the level of a 9-revolution great sage. Tearing the void was a piece of cake for him. The void shattered. Buffon and you walked out of it. Their feet stepped on the solid ground. Oh, Nether Prison? You seemed a little puzzled and couldn't help but whisper. Yes, this is Nether Prison, Buffon said with a serious face. Nether Prison, the land of the Nether Chef clan. I want to know why the Nether Chef clan was wiped out. Buffon said. After that, he took the lead and walked forward. Nethery was taken aback. She hurried to follow him. The extermination of a Nether Chef clan was often discussed in the restaurant, so she naturally knew about it. However, she didn't expect that Buffon would be interested in it. Was it because the exterminated chefs were the culprits? Tap, tap, tap. Only then did the souls howl miserably. White souls swept across the sky. A cold, gloomy aura kept spreading. As Bufong walked in the Nether Chef clan's land, white souls with twisted faces kept flying toward him and flying away. Bufong was very calm. With his hands clasped behind his back, he walked slowly. With his current cultivation base, as the great sage, he naturally didn't care about these ghosts. Oh! Suddenly, Bufong paused, focused his eyes, and looked into the distance. Their corpses were piled up all over the ground, and many stoves were burning. Among these flames were nether flames, immortal flames, and some low-grade flames. However, there was no doubt that they were all burning fiercely. It was as if there was an undying grievance that needed to be burned. Corpses were everywhere, their heads separated from their bodies, and their faces were filled with horror. In addition to the corpses, there were also messy plates with food piled up on the ground. The food had been repeatedly corroded by some power and lost its spirituality, turning sour and stinky. For the experts of the Nether Chef clan, this was an unbelievable thing. The dishes cooked by Nether Chefs or the Heaven Chief could not rot for 10,000 years. It was impossible for them to rot in such a short time. There must be some reason that caused all this. You frowned. The rancid smell in the air made her feel a little suffocated. Bufong, let's go. This place has become a land of death, she said. You said. Foxy, who was in her arms, also used its claws to cover its nose and kept nodding. Bufong looked around but couldn't find anything. He sighed softly. He nodded, turned, and was about to leave. However, the moment he turned, his pupils constricted. When he turned around, he saw you. And behind you, surprisingly, there was a burly figure who had evaded the probing of the divine will and was standing there quietly. Chapter 1393. A burly figure floated behind you like a ghost. You didn't even seem to notice it. It was only because Bufong had turned around that he saw it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known who was standing behind you, because Bufong's divine will couldn't detect this figure at all. Bufong's pupils constricted slightly, and his aura exploded out. Boom! Without the slightest hesitation, Bufong's divine will seem to turn into a stormy wave, which rushed toward you like a long awl. You was stunned. Foxy, who was curled up in her arms, let out a squeak, and all the fur on its body stood up. Bufong's attack was beyond you and Little Who's expectations. Boom! However, as his divine will approached, it was like a gentle breeze, and it didn't cause any harm to you and Little Who. A loud noise rang out. A rumbling sound came from behind you. At this moment, you also came to her senses. Her eyes suddenly turned black, and she disappeared from where she was. In the blink of an eye, she reappeared behind Bufong, facing the figure that had emerged. He was burly and majestic, and his aura was like that of a furnace. When Bufong looked over, he found a figure somewhat familiar, but he didn't know where he had seen him before. With a strange smile on his face, the figure stared at Bufong, making Bufong's hair stand on end. Of course, Zhuang's eyes were still fixed on you, as if he had found some prey. His divine will hit Zhuang, but it didn't make him retreat. His body didn't even shake. Interesting. Zhuang grinned as he looked at her. There seemed to be a strange look in his eyes. I didn't expect that there would be a curse goddess in such a remote area, and one who has perfectly fused the power of the curse into her body. The look into Zhuang's eyes grew more and more curious. He clasped his hands behind his back, and the muscles on his arms bulged as he paced back and forth at a leisurely pace. He was very calm, not worried at all that Bufong and you would do him any harm. Did you destroy the Nether Chef clan? Bufong took a deep breath and asked. His expression was cold as he asked with a frown. De Zhuang's gaze froze, and he glanced at Bufong coldly. The Nether Chef clan is a group of believers who betrayed me. Death is the best ending for them. The smile on De Zhuang's face was as cold as ever. When he said that, he was very calm, as if the destruction of the Nether Chef clan was no different from crushing a group of ants. On the other hand, you have an aura that interests me. This aura seems familiar. De Zhuang narrowed his eyes and locked his gaze on Bufang. Bufang raised his eyebrows slightly. The next moment, his eyes narrowed, because De Zhuang had moved. With a rumble, he disappeared from where he was as if he had teleported. When he reappeared, he was at Yu's side. Then, he slapped a palm down toward Yu, trying to catch Yu. A cursed goddess who has perfectly fused with the cursed power is an excellent vessel. It's rare to see one, so I naturally won't let it go. De Zhuang grinned. Then, he grabbed Yu with his palm. Boom! At that moment, Nethery felt a wave of terrifying energy. Under the shroud of this energy, her whole body tensed up, and she couldn't move at all. It was an extremely strange feeling. Scram! However, in the face of De Zhuang's palm, Bufang only spat out a single word. Then, he waved his Taotai arm. Terrible energy swirled around it as he slammed it toward De Zhuang's palm. Rumble! The fist and the palm collided. Yin and yang energy swirled around Bufang's Taotai arm. De Zhuang didn't move. Bufang, on the other hand, took a few steps back. His Taotai arm seemed to have hit a mountain, and he couldn't move it at all. Instead, the backlash made his arm shake violently. Bufang's pupils constricted. How could a Zhuang be so strong? Bufang remembered. As someone who possessed divine will, his memory was naturally extraordinary. He remembered who this De Zhuang was. This fellow was a member of Alpha's warship. When Alpha was at its wit's end, De Zhuang fled on a dragon. But something was wrong. Bufang took a deep breath. At that time, De Zhuang was only the great sage. How could he have withstood his punch and skate? If he was a member of Alpha's warship, why did he kill the Nether Chef clan? None of these things made sense. It was too strange. Weak. Too weak. De Zhuang smiled faintly. It's rare for a cursed goddess to come to me in person. I'll kill you today. He let out a long roar. The next moment, his aura exploded and rose steadily. The next moment, a strange energy flowed out of his body. It was a strange rune that seemed to be born out of thin air. It was a rune of law. Bufang recognized it at a glance. A rune of law. This De Zhuang has mastered the power of law. Is he a demigod or a god? Bufang sucked in a breath. He didn't expect there to be such an existence in Nether Prison. He didn't hesitate. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. The dragon bone kitchen knife fell into his hand. In the face of an existence who had mastered the power of law, whether it was a god or a demigod, Bufang did not dare to relax. After all, the power of law was a power above the will of the Great Path. A kitchen knife? Are you a chef too? No wonder it feels so familiar. Chefs are the cutest. Do you want to have a chef's challenge with me? De Zhuang grinned. Then, he raised his hand and spread his fingers in Bufang's direction. Boom! Bufang's pupils constricted. He found that the ground around him had exploded. Pillars of fire shot out from within, turning into numerous fire dragons that surged about. This fire dragon was dark green in color. It was incomparably awe-inspiring, as if it contained great terror. Boom! Under the control of De Zhuang's divine sense, the fire dragon spiraled up, roared in the air, and charged wildly toward Bufang. Without hesitation, Bufang snapped his fingers. Instantly, white flames emerged around him. As soon as the flames appeared, they rushed out and blocked the fire dragon's attack. The dark green flames collided with the white flames as if they were trying to devour each other. Bufang pushed his divine sense to the extreme. The white flames kept roaring, resisting the fire dragon's attack. Sizzle! The rocks on the ground seemed to melt, incinerated by the intense heat. Yu and Little Hu also released their energy to protect themselves. They didn't expect to meet a demigod here. Unless the Lord Go appeared, how could they stop him? A Zhuang laughed, confident of his victory. He stared at Yu with a greedy look in his eyes. Cursed goddess, if you can comprehend the law of curse, you will be even more valuable. He chuckled, but it didn't matter. As long as he subdued the cursed goddess and trained her, it would be easy for her to comprehend the law of curse. After all, he was the great god of Chef's Challenge. The flames were constantly suppressed, and Bufong's white flames were compressed to less than an inch around him. The fire dragons were too terrifying, and the temperature of the flames was extremely high. Clearly, they were not flames of this world. Zhuang sneered. The next moment, he didn't want to waste any more time with Bufong. His figure flashed, and he disappeared from where he was. When he reappeared, he was beside you. His divine sense surged. Instantly, a rumbling sound rang out. In a flash, you and Bufong were separated by the cage. Zhuang, on the other hand, walked slowly toward you. Nethery's black hair fluttered in the wind. The next moment, she shot away, retreating rapidly. Zhuang's face was full of ridicule. Although this body didn't belong to him, as the great god of Chef's Challenge, he could exert great strength even if he attached himself to an ordinary body. Besides, he was only dealing with two great sages. Surrounded by the fire dragons, Bufong stared coldly at Zhuang. He didn't expect this guy's target to be you. How could he tolerate this? A ghostly green light emerged in Yu's eyes, and her aura kept spreading. A hissing sound rang out. A ghostly green cursed snake was coiling around you. Its eyes lit up, and it stuck out its tongue and hissed silently at Zhuang. The next moment, the cursed snake rushed out like a coiling flood dragon. The power of curses that haven't become a law is useless to me. Zhuang was very confident. With a flick of his finger, the ghostly green power of the law gathered in his palm and shot out in a flash. The cursed snake melted like snow. Yu's face turned pale in an instant. The power that she couldn't resist made her feel a little desperate. She felt as if she was facing a god. Was the man in front of her a god? Since when were there so many gods in the netherworld? Yu felt despair. Little Hu, who was in her arms, rose to his feet and bared his teeth fiercely. Then he opened his mouth, and dazzling light and energy burst out of it. Boom, boom, boom. Enhanced explosive meatball shells shot out one after another, charging towards the Zhuang like streams of light. However, every cannonball that hit the Zhuang's body did not cause him any harm, even if they exploded. He didn't even need to block it. Tickling me, Zhuang smiled faintly. This little Hu is just right for me to braise. As soon as his voice rang out, he was already approaching her. He raised his hand, and a terrible pressure burst out of him and smashed down. You gave a muffled grunt, and her face turned even paler. Little Hu also froze. A shell was stuck in his throat, but he couldn't spit it out no matter how hard he tried. Zhuang, on the other hand, grinned. He reached out a hand and grabbed at you. He kept approaching, trying to take you away. In the distance, Bufong, who was enveloped by the fire dragon, was angry. His eyes were filled with a menacing look. Suddenly, monstrous waves rose in his spirit sea. The next moment, they exploded. A golden light flashed in Bufong's eyes. He crushed one of the pale golden divine power liquid drops on the god of cooking's menu. Countless strands of energy scattered and enveloped Bufong. An invisible force enveloped him. Bufong breathed a soft sigh of relief. Phew! Then, a rumbling sound rang out. The fire dragons collapsed and scattered. All of them disappeared. In the distance, Zhuang, who was reaching out his hand toward you, froze. His eyes narrowed. He slowly turned his head to look in Bufong's direction. However, before he could do so, he found his hand was caught by a fair, slender hand. Blue veins seemed to pop out of the palm. Zhuang felt a little incredulous. How could a great sage scatter his fire dragon? That fire dragon contained the power of the law. His eyes fell on the thin figure in front of him. The latter slowly raised his head. His eyes were cold, and his face was expressionless. Golden energy kept dispersing from his body. Zhuang's eyes narrowed. His heart seemed to be in turmoil. This power. Zhuang's face was full of horror as he looked at Bufong in disbelief. How could you master this kind of divine power? Zhuang growled. His face seemed to be a little twisted. Bufong looked at him indifferently. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, looking a little ghostly. Why can't I control this power? He asked calmly. As his voice rang out, and yang energy swirled around the Tao Tai arm. Then Bufang's fist smashed on Zhuang's face. With a loud bang, Zhuang's face caved in from the impact. Chapter 1394. Boom! An oppressive rumble rang through the air. It was as if the air had exploded. The next moment, a figure flew backward, crushing the void and smashing the ground. The whole Nether Chef clan's land was smashed into pieces in an instant. Cracks covered the ground, and all the inextinguishable stoves in the surroundings were shattered. Zhuang's figure flew out and rolled a few times on the ground before he managed to stabilize himself. Kneeling on one knee, he slowly raised his head. The flame dragons around you were extinguished by Bufang with a palm. She pursed her lips and looked at Bufang. Her black eyes had returned to normal, and they looked lively again. Little Hu, on the other hand, kept jumping in Yu's arms and waving his little fists excitedly. He seemed very happy that Bufang had knocked away Zhuang, who had bullied him with one punch. Bufang signaled Yu and Little Hu to step back, while he stood where he was and looked indifferently at Zhuang, who was kneeling on one knee in the distance. When his fist touched Zhuang's body, Bufang felt something strange. Zhuang should be dead. It was not Zhuang who was controlling the body at the moment. In the distance, a deep laugh rang out. Zhuang slowly raised his head. His entire face had sunk in, revealing a strange contortion. There was a strange look on his face. Zhuang's sunken face slowly swelled up, as though it was being inflated. Soon, it was restored to its original appearance. He looked like a rubber man. This was definitely not what an ordinary person could do. It was as if his body was not that of a human. Divine power. I can't believe you have divine power. This aura, this oppressive power. Zhuang jerked his head up. His pupils had shrunk to the size of sesame seeds, and his face was full of madness. No one knew whether he was laughing or angry. Buzz, a wave of air spread out from his body. Then he raised his hand. He pointed his finger at Bufang. Buzz, a flame dragon, emerged again, wheeling in all directions as it charged crazily toward Bufang. Roar! The fire dragon soared into the sky, the power of the laws circulating within it as if it wanted to destroy the world. Bufang stood still and took a deep breath. He gripped the dragon bone kitchen knife tightly. His divine will swept out, and heaven and earth seemed to be suppressed. After crushing it, the power of the god of cooking's divine power filled his whole body, making Bufang feel as if he could shatter heaven and earth with a single punch. Bufang did not have a deep understanding of the power of the god of cooking's divine power. The fire dragon approached. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun. With a ripping sound, it was as if a hazy divine power had covered the kitchen knife. As it slashed down, the knife energy spread and instantly cut the fire dragon in half. One slash, immortal slaying, Bufang said lightly. In the next moment, the blade energy that filled the sky gathered in the void, condensing into a blade light that stretched across the void. The saber radiance was resplendent and dazzling, blotting out the sky. This power, Zhuang's eyes were filled with madness. Blue veins kept popping up on his muscles, wriggling like worms. Then, he swung it at the void, shattering the ground and filling the air with a rumbling sound. A huge fire dragon soared into the sky and collided with Bufang's knife energy. The fire dragon contained the power of the laws, and the knife energy was wrapped in divine power. When they collided, they seemed to be neck and neck. Rumbling filled the air, while blasts of air towered into the sky. Terrible power kept sweeping out. The moment the explosion rang out, the battle here attracted the attention of all parties. The extermination of the Nether Chef clan was a major event, and now that such a battle broke out in their land, it naturally attracted the attention of all parties. Countless experts were rushing towards this place at high speed. From afar, countless experts hovered in midair. The patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans also emerged. Of course, the patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans had just been elected. Except for the patriarchs of the Fire Demon clan and the Shadow Demon clan, The other patriarchs were all new. However, their cultivation bases were not weak. Hovering in midair, shrouded in dark clouds, they looked in the direction of the Nether Chef clan. Everyone was shocked by what they saw. Who was that burly man? He's so strong. It seems to be the aura of the power of the laws. Could it be that besides Patriarch D-Ting and Earth Prison Dog, there are other existences who have mastered the power of the laws in the Netherworld? Look, that's the owner of Acheron's little restaurant. Why is he here? Everyone was shocked. This was a battle that they had never imagined would happen. The main reason was the burly man who had mastered the power of the laws. An existence who mastered the power of the laws was definitely a peak existence in the Netherworld. And Acheron's little restaurant's owner was just the great sage. Yet he could fight such an existence to the point of madness. It was indeed terrifying. Could that burly man be the culprit who wiped out the Nether Chef clan? Someone thought in this way, and this idea was quickly agreed upon by everyone. The battle on the battlefield was reaching its climax. Zhuang was so excited that his body seemed to be trembling. His original target was the cursed goddess, but when Bufang crushed his divine power and displayed his fearsome strength, his target changed to Bufang. That power, although he could not be sure for the time being, once he was sure, it was enough to make his blood boil. Boom! The ground around him kept crumbling. Bufang hovered in midair. Thousands of knife energy filled the air around him. Zhuang grinned, his eyes full of fierceness. One flaming dragon after another emerged, roaring ferociously. All of them contained the terrible power of the laws. Bufang's eyes were indifferent. Vengeful souls floated around him, and countless broken souls were roaring. They were unwilling to give up, and they were hissing. These vengeful souls were the wills of the dead Nether Chefs. They lingered around Zhuang like ghosts crying. The stove was broken, but the flames were still burning. Among them were immortal flames, nether flames, and all kinds of strange flames. They were the flames mastered by the Nether Chefs. They nurtured them with their bodies and minds, which was the key to helping them cook delicious food. Now, the Nether Chefs were dead, but the flames did not go out. Bufang raised his hand, and a white flame rose from it. The flames were burning fiercely. Bufang stared sharply at Zhuang down below. Then, the countless immortal flames and nether flames in the surroundings seemed to sense something and flew toward him. They rushed toward Bufang like moths flying into a flame. It was a spectacular scene. Countless immortal flames and nether flames surged and gathered into Bufang's flames. It was like a beautiful flower bud was blooming, a beautiful cluster of flowers. Zhuang floated up as well. Surrounded by the fire of the laws, he looked disdainfully at Bufang, who seemed to want to absorb those ownerless immortal flames and nether flames. In his opinion, those flames were inferior. Do you feel the unwillingness and anger in those flames? He said, grinning. You want to absorb these flames? You have to bear their karma. Do you dare? What is karma? Bufang asked expressionlessly. Balls of flames surrounded his eerie white flames. Zhuang grinned. They died because of my chef's challenge. If you swallow these flames, it means you have to help them defeat me in a chef's challenge. This is the so-called karma. Zhuang said. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips, looking a little greedy. Chef challenge. Come on, chef challenge. Once it's a chef's challenge, I will know your secrets, and I will know everything about you. As long as I win the chef's challenge, everything you have will belong to me. Zhuang's mind was roaring crazily. He was greedy and eager. The divine aura on Bufang's body attracted him like a nightmare. A chef's challenge? Bufang bowed his head. No one knew what he was thinking. Bufang could feel that all this seemed to be a trap set by Zhuang to force him into a chef's challenge. How could Bufang not know about a chef's challenge? The system had provided chef challenges, and the Nether Chef clan also had chef challenges. Now, Zhuang wanted him to have a chef's challenge. Around them, the remnant souls were howling and lingering in the sky. The flames that filled the sky were like beautiful flower buds blooming, blooming one after another, incomparably beautiful. However, the more beautiful they were, the more dangerous they were. Down below, you and Little Hoop both held their breaths, not daring to say a word. The surrounding experts sucked in their breaths as well. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of whistling kept ringing out in the sky. Experts from Nether Prison, Earth Prison, and even the surrounding small worlds were arriving at a great speed. Zhuang was suspected to be a god. But so what if he was a god? The sky was torn apart. An enchanting black dog walked out of the rift, strutting its cat-like steps, its fat jiggling. Behind the black dog, there was a short-legged dog following obediently. The appearance of the two silenced the crowd. No one dared to say a word. Earth Prison Dog, a mighty god of the netherworld. Even Di Ting had become Hellhound's god slave. So how could they dare to be presumptuous? Even the patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans were bowing to Earth Prison Dog at this moment. Lord Go, on the other hand, was very lazy. He lifted his gaze lazily and looked into the distance. His gaze landed onto Zhuang, who was facing off against Bufang. A complete law of power. A god? The fat on Lord Go's face jiggled as he murmured, "It's not a real god. It's just a physical body that descended. However, to be able to do something like this god is definitely not ordinary." The Harkin replied. The surrounding people all sucked in a cold breath. It really was a god. Honorable was actually confronting a god. The uproar resounded incessantly. Suddenly, someone's eyes narrowed and he looked over carefully. His expression turned grave once more. Boom! In front of Bufang, the white flame grew brighter. The immortal flames, nether flames, and strange flames that were floating like blooming flowers were swallowed by Bufang's flame. Buzz, the white flame kept devouring the surrounding flames, and its terrible power began to rise. It was a very strange and unusual feeling. Zhuang's pupils constricted. The next moment, he opened his mouth and burst into laughter that resounded through the sky. "You've accepted it. I'm afraid you can't bear this karma." Zhuang laughed crazily. He was the god of Chef's Challenge. How could he lose a Chef's Challenge? He couldn't possibly lose. As long as he won the Chef's Challenge, all Bufang's secrets would belong to him. But perhaps he was too excited. Zhuang's eyes suddenly burst into a blood-colored light. The light shone brightly and turned into a blood-colored array in the sky, which swept out and enveloped Bufang in a flash. In the distance, Lord Go frowned. "God's domain. TSK, TSK, TSK. Bufang is finished. If I'm not mistaken, that fellow should be a clone of the god of Chef's Challenge. The god of Chef's Challenge is the god worshipped by the Nether Chef clan. The destruction of the Nether Chef clan should be related to him," Di Ting said gloatingly. "This is the god's realm of the god of Chef's Challenge. Bufang can only break free if he wins the Chef's Challenge. Otherwise, he will die," Di Ting said with a chuckle. "God of Chef's Challenge." Lord Go's face trembled slightly. Then it raised its exquisite paw. Buzz on the dog's paw. The law of time circulated, and law runes twined around it, causing the void to distort and collapse. "Who cares what kind of god he is? I'll just kill him with one swipe of my claw," the Lord Go said calmly. The Harkin, on the other hand, was taken aback. "You're crazy. Your claw might be able to break God's domain, but Bufang will definitely die. Now, we can only wait and see if Bufang can win the Chef's Challenge," Di Ting said, looking into the distance. Lord Go retracted his paw, and a cold look emerged in his eyes. "What bullsh *T god of Chef's Challenge? If Bufang loses even a strand of his hair, Lord Go, I will kill my way to the Divine Dynasty and skin him alive," Lord Go said coldly, raising his exquisite paw. Di Ting narrowed his eyes. Boom, boom, boom. Countless flames were quickly devoured by the white flame. Bufang had obtained the ability to devour flames from the system, but Bufang rarely used it. Now that he had devoured so many flames at once, Bufang felt a wave of pressure. He felt like he was bloating. When the last ball of flame was devoured, the eerie white flames finally began to ripple, and some changes began to take place. In the spirit sea, the black turtle, whose eyes were closed, suddenly opened them. He seemed to have sensed something. A rumbling voice rang out of his mouth. "Little host, hurry up. Put a divine power liquid drop into the flame. This is rare. To use the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop as a guide, to condense a divine flame that can fuse with the law. I can't miss this opportunity." Chapter 1395. The black tortoise's voice rang in Bufong's ears like a huge bell. Bufong, who was watching the flame, was slightly taken aback. There was a hint of doubt in Bufong's eyes. He seemed to be thinking about the meaning of the black tortoise's words. Using divine power to fuse with the divine flame? Does the black tortoise want me to consume a drop of the god of cooking's divine power and fuse it with the flame? A drop of divine power was very precious. The artifact spirit was heartbroken when he saw Bufong waste it. He didn't expect that this time the black tortoise would ask Bufong to consume a drop of divine power. This showed how serious the matter was. Because of his trust in Black Turtle, he did not hesitate for long and send out his divine will. His spirit sea began to churn. Then, a drop of divine power surged up and rushed into the white flame that was devouring the myriad flames. The white flame seemed to boil. The moment the divine power liquid droplet entered, it began to spread. In a split second, it had spread throughout the entire flame. The divine force liquid droplets scattered, as if turning into fine granules. Under the burning of the flames, they began to evaporate like a spider web, densely covered in flames. Soon, the white flame began to change color. Its color kept changing. Finally, it slowly disappeared, became transparent, and lost its color. An invisible flame? Even Bufong was a little stunned. He looked at his empty palm and couldn't see the flame with the naked eye. However, in fact, Bufong could feel the heat hovering over his palm. In other words, it had fused the flames of all the Nether Chefs in the Nether Chef clan in a divine power liquid drop. His flame seemed to have evolved. As for why it lost its color and became transparent, it was probably related to the divine power liquid drop. At least, this invisible flame was very mysterious. Bufong's divine will spread, but he couldn't sense anything. It was as if there was nothing above his palm. This was very strange. A flame that couldn't be sensed by divine will was simply against common sense. However, it was a flame that consumed a drop of divine power liquid droplet after all, so it was naturally extraordinary. Opposite Bufong, De Zhuang, who was floating in the void, had a disdainful smile on his face. Everything around him was covered by his god domain. Therefore, when the flame in Bufong's hand gradually disappeared, he found it a little ridiculous. Although he didn't know why Bufong's flame that had swallowed all the flames disappeared. But De Zhuang only thought that Bufong might have chosen to do something beyond his power, causing his flames to dissipate. With so many flames swallowing in an instant, even his law of fire might not be able to withstand it. Not to mention the immortal fire in Bufong's hands. However, that was not what De Zhuang was concerned about, regardless of whether the flames disappeared or not. As long as Bufong chose to have a chef's challenge with him, nothing else mattered, because since Bufong had chosen the chef challenge, he was as good as dead. There was a price to pay to have a chef's challenge with the god of chef's challenge, and that price was life and everything that belonged to Bufong. Hovering in the void, Bufong stared blankly at his empty hand. Although he couldn't see the flames, he could feel that there was a ball of flames burning, and the temperature was very high. It was far higher than the previous immortal fire. Although he couldn't see it, Bufong could feel it. Moreover, he could control it as if it was his own arm. It was much easier to control than the previous white flame. This was a little magical. The black turtle said this was a divine flame, a flame that could step into the god realm. At this moment, Bufong was full of questions and wanted to ask. However, his mind sank into his spirit sea. Before he could ask, the black turtle spoke. Little host, with the god of cooking's divine power as a guide, the flame fused is a divine flame. A divine flame needs to fuse with the laws to become stronger. Now, it is as pure as a white lotus. Host needs to find the laws to fuse with it in the following days. The more laws it fuses with, the stronger the flame will be, the black turtle said. A divine flame that fused with the laws. Bufang's expression became very strange. Don't ask me how I know. After living for a long time, you have seen many things, the black turtle said again, then closed his eyes and said no more. Bufang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Has the black turtle been infected by the white tiger? I can't believe he has become so arrogant. However, Bufang still trusted the black turtle. If it was the divine dragon who said this, Bufang might hesitate, but the black turtle had always been very steady, so Bufang chose to believe him. The invisible flame danced like fairies as he moved his fingers. Bufang couldn't see it, but he could feel it. The others couldn't see it, nor could they feel it. With a thought in his mind, the invisible flame wrapped around his body. Hovering in midair, Bufang looked indifferently at Zhuang in the distance. Although the invisible divine flame's power was peerless, it was, after all, born from the fusion of 10,000 flames, which contained the obsession of the Nether Chef clan. As Zhuang said, it was entangled with Bufang. Bufang couldn't ignore it. Therefore, he had to carry out this chef's challenge. Slowly, he floated down. Bufang landed on the solid ground, and he felt a sense of security. Bufang glanced around and saw an invisible force enveloping the area, isolating everything in heaven and earth. This is the god's domain. You will surely lose in this chef's challenge, Zhuang chuckled confidently. He looked at Bufang as if he was looking at a prey he was determined to catch. Do you know what god I am? He asked. Bufang shook his head. He was a little puzzled. I am the god of Chef's Challenge, and I am in charge of the order of Chef's Challenges. The god that the Nether Chef clan believed in is me. They betrayed me, so I killed them, Zhuang said with a hint of ridicule in his voice. Do you think you can still live if you choose to fight the god of Chef's Challenge? I see. Bufang nodded. He finally understood the truth of the Nether Chef clan's massacre. After learning the truth, Bufang felt a little sorry for the Nether Chef clan. It was a tragedy to have such a god. I'll end your obsession. Bufang's face gradually became cold and determined. Since you want a chef's challenge, come on. So what if you're a god? A chef's challenge is a competition of cooking skills. Even a god can't break the rules, Bufang said. Rules were the laws. Gods comprehended the laws, but at the same time, they had to obey them. That was why Bufang was very calm. If it was a problem that could be solved by cooking a dish, it was not a problem for Bufang. You're very arrogant. It seems you're very confident in the power you control. I like your confidence and admire it, Zhuang chuckled. The next moment, he snapped his fingers. Buzz, a wheel of law emerged in the sky. The wheel of law hung in the sky, emitting a boundless luster. This nomological wheel was somewhat similar to the nomological golden wheel that the Lord Go had used to transcend the divine tribulation, but its power was much weaker. But even if it was much weaker, the power of the laws revolving within it made one's hair stand on end. This is the wheel of law, which contains the pure laws of a chef's challenge. It will be the witness of our chef's challenge. Life and death will be controlled by it. The Zhuang said. He looked at the wheel of law with some infatuation, only to see the wheel of law slowly rotating. Law runes spread out from it. They shot toward Zhuang and Bufang. It wrapped around the two of them. Now, everything we say and do is controlled by the wheel of law. Let the chef's challenge begin. The Zhuang said. The rules of the chef's challenge are simple and brutal. Each of us will cook a dish, and the dish will be judged by the wheel of law. The wheel of law will decide the winner. The winner will live, and the loser will die. De Zhuang narrowed his eyes and stared greedily at Bufang. Suddenly, he laughed. Oh, I forgot to tell you that this body is not mine. So even if I lose, only this body will be destroyed, and nothing will happen to me. Of course, I won't lose either. Are you angry? De Zhuang laughed, and his laughter rang through the whole world. The faces of the surrounding people changed dramatically, and they cursed under their breaths. Was a god so shameless? Lord Go even snorted. His exquisite dog paw floated in the air, surrounded by the terrible law of time, causing the void to collapse. He wished he could throw the paw. But when he thought of Di Ting's words, he gave up the idea. Bu Fong was very calm. He didn't care about De Zhuang's sneer. Psychological tactics? It was useless to him. He could feel the vigilance in De Zhuang's heart. It seemed that the other party knew his cooking skills very well. Since De Zhuang longed for Bu Fong's secrets and power, he would not look down on Bu Fong. All of this was a facade for Bu Fong. He wanted to shake Bu Fong's mind. Let's begin, Bu Fong said lightly. His voice was calm and unperturbed. De Zhuang's laughter stopped abruptly, and his face became cold. Okay. As soon as his voice rang out, everyone held their breaths. Their eyes were fixed on the chef's challenge in the sky. It was a battle between chefs, and it was also exciting and attracted everyone's attention. Boom! The wheel of law spun. The void under the wheel of law seemed to crack open. There seemed to be gods and fairies floating in the crack. It was like a brand new world inside. Ingredients slowly floated out of it. They were the ingredients for this chef's challenge. All kinds of ingredients floated out of the crack, hovering in the air. There were pieces of meat that emitted mighty spiritual energy, vegetables that bloomed with colorful light, and spirit beast eggs that rumbled like waterfalls. All kinds of ingredients were dazzling to the eyes. All of them were top-grade ingredients. In the great netherworld, it was as rare as a phoenix feather or a unicorn horn, and it was impossible to find a top-grade ingredient. The corners of De Zhuang's mouth cracked. He raised his hand. Immediately, among the dazzling array of ingredients, a piece of meat floated towards him. In a short while, it floated in front of him. Do you know what this meat is? De Zhuang reached out his hand and gently stroked the meat, as if he was pouring all his emotions into it. Bu Fong glanced at the meat with a serious look in his eyes. That meat was the best meat Bu Fong had ever seen. It was much better than the three-clawed true dragon's meat. This is the silver-winged rock's thigh meat. It's not weaker than the five-clawed golden dragon's meat. The rock clan is a powerful clan in the chaotic universe, and a silver-winged rock and golden-winged rock are even rarer. The delicacies cooked with this meat will surely shock the world. De Zhuang's eyes were full of tenderness as he gently stroked the meat. This was the most serious chef's challenge he had ever been in, and he didn't dare to be careless. After all, even he was afraid of the secrets in Bu Fong's body. Silver-winged rock meat. The audience was shocked and in an uproar. They had never heard of rock, so how could they have seen silver-winged rock meat? It was comparable to the five-clawed golden dragon's meat, so it must be extraordinary. Owner Bu was in danger. What would Owner Bu do to deal with it? The audience was puzzled. Bu Fong raised his head, looking at the dazzling array of ingredients in the sky. The energy emitted by the top-grade ingredients made the sky colorful. Bu Fong glanced around, looking for the ingredient he needed to deal with the rock meat. All of a sudden, Bu Fong's eyes narrowed and locked onto one of the colorful ingredients. Then, he waved at the ingredient. Countless translucent, crystal-like fresh prawns floated around him. Chapter 1396. Fresh shrimps floated around Bu Fong's body. These shrimps seemed to be flashing with a glazed light, as if they contained a mighty power. Unlike Zhuang's choice of rock meat, Bu Fong chose fresh shrimps this time. Shrimps versus meat? Many people in the surroundings fell silent. Many of them did not know how to cook, but when it came to food, it was hard to say which was better between shrimps and meat. It mainly depended on the chef's skill. However, Zhuang chose rock meat. Although it was only silver-winged rock meat, it was after all a rock. How could a few fresh river shrimps compare to an ingredient that could compare to true dragon meat? They could tell that the shrimps Bu Fong chose were not ordinary. At least, in terms of attribute, they were high-grade shrimps that they had never seen before. However, no matter what kind of shrimps they were, They could not compare to rock meat, could they? Lord Go was a little annoyed. He felt that Bu Fong should not have chosen shrimps but dragon meat. He should have ordered a plate of sweet-in, sour dragon ribs, which would have destroyed the world. However, Bu Fong chose shrimps. How could shrimps compare to sweet-in, sour dragon ribs? The gap was too big. Zhuang was also a little surprised by Bu Fong's choice. As a qualified chef, it was impossible for him not to understand the excellence of rock meat. He had even prepared the meat Bu Fong had chosen to compete with him in terms of cooking skills. However, in the end, Bu Fong chose a few fresh shrimps. Was he too arrogant? Was he looking down on his cooking skills? No matter what, he was the god of Chef's Challenge, and his cooking skills were not something that a mortal could compare with. You're courting death. Zhuang grinned, holding the rock meat hovering in the air in his palm. A look of excitement came over his face. It was the kind of smile that indicated victory was already in his grasp. He had killed all the nether chefs, but he did not kill indiscriminately for no reason. He chose to have a chef's challenge, and those chefs were killed after they failed. Of course, some chefs knew they would fail, but they did not want to have a chef's challenge and chose to flee. But could he escape? Zhuang would not hesitate to kill anyone who violated the rules of the game. That was why the Nether Chef clan was now littered with corpses. It was just a group of mortals, so the god of Chef's Challenge did not feel any burden in his heart. After all, he was a god, an incomparably powerful god. His heart was firm and strong, and he would not be moved by a group of mortals. But the cursed goddess and Bu Fong, who had mastered the mysterious power, made Zhuang's heart surge. But their bodies were shrouded by the power of law, and the mysterious runes of law were swirling around them. There was a force that seemed to be entangled with Bu Fong's soul. This feeling made Bu Fong squint his eyes slightly. For this chef's challenge, he had to be serious. Boom! In the distance, Zhuang's aura exploded. It was as if a majestic phantom had appeared behind his body. It was a figure that looked down on everyone with a terrifying and oppressive aura. It was incomparably terrifying. Lord Go focused his eyes. Looking at the phantom behind Zhuang, he stuck out his tongue. The god of Chef's Challenge? Interesting. He has at least two kinds of laws. One is probably the law of Chef's Challenge that he relied on to become a god, and the other should be a mutated law of fire. Lord Go said he had comprehended the law of time, one of the strongest laws of the universe. Therefore, Lord Go's vision was extraordinary. There are differences in strength among gods as well. Take Lord Go and Di Ting, for example. When Lord Go beat Di Ting, it was a one-sided beating because Lord Go was stronger than Di Ting. And this strength was based on the strength of Lord Go's laws. At the god level, the strength of a god was basically based on the number of laws they comprehended. Someone like Di Ting, who had comprehended ordinary laws, could only be regarded as an ordinary low-grade god. Because the first law he comprehended was an ordinary law, the upper limit of the number of laws he could comprehend from low-grade gods to mid-grade gods was very small, ranging from 3 to 6. For gods like Lord Go, who had comprehended the strongest laws of the universe, the upper limit of the laws he could comprehend from low-grade to mid-grade was 9. Only after becoming a god would he understand the importance of the laws. This so-called god of Chef's Challenge had comprehended at least 2 laws, which meant that his fighting prowess was much stronger than Di Ting's. Honorbu is going to have a Chef's Challenge with a god. Can he win? Everyone took a deep breath and murmured. Meanwhile, the Chef's Challenge had begun. Zhuang's cold laugh rang through the void, and his hands didn't slow down. Streams of light shot out and floated around his body. Kitchen knives, stoves, pots, each of the kitchen utensils flashed with a gorgeous luster, showing the nobility of being used by a god. The artifact spirits among them exuded a strong aura. On the other side, Bu Fong was not afraid. The dragon bone kitchen knife, the black turtle constellation wok, and the vermilion robe all shook. The white tiger heaven stove appeared, accompanied by a tiger roar, which made Bu Fong's aura rise to the peak. Zhuang squinted at Bu Fong. The sneer and mockery on his face didn't disappear. Boom! A ghostly green flame burned, wrapping around his body and surging over his palm. A zhuang threw the piece of rock meat shrouded in divine aura into his palm. It hovered over the flame. Sizzle, the sound of warm oil splashing constantly resounded. He was using the flame of the law to process the meat. It melted the divine substance on the meat and slowly seeped into it. This was a very powerful method, and his control of the flame had reached a superb level. The golden wok glowed. All kinds of ingredients appeared in Zhuang's hand, which he had prepared himself. The ingredients he took out were some vegetables that were stained with crystal droplets. On the other side, Bufang also began to cook. Many people were paying attention to what Bufang would cook, although they were more concerned about how Zhuang would process the rock meat. Many of them also wanted to learn how to cook it. Bufang's mind was focused. He began to process the prawns. This was also a technical job. Holding a lively prawn, Bufang's index finger and thumb pressed on the first segment of the prawn. Then, the dragon bone kitchen knife spun, chopping off the prawn's head and tail. The knife cut horizontally, picking out the prawn thread, peeling off the shell, and leaving the prawn meat. This set of movements was as smooth as flowing water, without any jerkiness. It was too much for the eyes to take in. Many people who were paying attention to Bufang exclaimed. No matter what kind of ingredients Bufang had chosen, at least, owner Bu's cooking skills were there for all to see. Step by step, Bufang unhurriedly removed the head, tail, and shell of the prawns. Shortly after, the blue and white porcelain plate was filled with processed prawn meat. This prawn meat was really not bad. It looked sparkling and translucent like a crystal, which shocked people. Next was the most important step. Cooking allowed the chef to bring his own ingredients. Thus, Bufang's mind flickered, sinking into the heaven and earth farmland. He plucked a tender leaf from the 9-revolution Great Path tea tree. Then, he placed the tender leaf in the cold tea, steeped it, and formed a tea soup. Bufang placed all of the prawn meat into the tea, then added in the other ingredients and began to process it. He kneaded the slippery prawn meat in his hands, feeling the tightness of the prawn meat in his palms. Then, he washed the prawn meat and sucked the water out of it. Then, he began to marinate it. After marinating for a while, he added egg white and seasoning. After beating it for a while, he continued to marinate. After doing that, Bufang opened his palms. Several leaves were quietly lying in his palms. The verdant leaves seemed to have moving lines on them. These were the leaves of the 9-revolution Great Path tea. They were also the key to this dish. Bufang had to process these tea leaves well. The quality of the tea would affect the taste of the dish. The water from a spring of life boiled. He placed the 9-revolution Great Path tea leaves into a blue and white porcelain bowl, then soaked them in hot water. The refreshing aroma of the tea instantly filled the air. The tea soup was dark green, which was very beautiful. The tea was still brewing. On the other side, Bufang continued to process the prawns. He placed the marinated prawns into the wok. After the warm oil had passed through it, the prawns became tender and white, sparkling and translucent like jade. The thick aroma of the prawn spread, lingering in people's nostrils. They couldn't help but take in a deep breath. Feeling the aroma spreading, Bufang's eyes suddenly lit up. He cut the scale-tail scallion into pieces, then threw them into the wok and began to stir-fry. After stirring the scallion fragrance, he added the oiled prawns and started to stir. The prawns in the wok had already been drained of the oil. They looked even more sparkling and translucent, as if they were sparkling. They made a tinkling sound. After stir-frying for a while, Bufang poured the tea leaves and soup into the wok. There wasn't much soup, and there weren't many tea leaves either. After entering the wok, sizzling sounds could be heard. A few drops of the top-grade acheron of helplessness were added, and the rich aroma of the wine spread out. Many people exclaimed in surprise. Many people were very familiar with this wine aroma, so they couldn't help but exclaim. Bufang poured the liquor into the wok, stirring it a few more times. The tea leaves in the wok looked crystal clear and round. After emitting a green hue, the cooking was over. Steaming hot air surged up. Bufong took out a blue and white porcelain plate with a fish's mouth. Bufong took out a spirit fruit, gently tossing it up. The dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand spun. Instantly, the pulp and dregs of the fruit splashed. The floor was covered with blood. A tender pink lotus bloomed in Bufong's hand. The center of the lotus was hollowed out, and the stir-fried, 9-revolution Great Path prawns were poured into it. The slightly mellow broth that was slightly viscous flowed out from the gaps between the petals of the lotus and slid into the blue and white porcelain plate. It was very pleasing to the eye, like a red lotus in the summer. Bufong's palm suddenly rose, and an invisible flame slowly burned on it. The scorching heat caused the air to distort. Slowly, in Bufong's palm, there seemed to be a white mist, which seemed to be twirling around it. White steam rose, wrapping around his palm. Bufong's divine will flickered. Immediately, he slowly pushed out his palm. The white steam on his palm spread out, pouring into the blue and white porcelain plate. Like immortal energy, it shrouded the bottom of the lotus, which looked like a cold blue pool. From the beginning to the end, Bufong's cooking didn't seem to see any flame. Many people were bewildered. After all, it was an invisible flame. However, as the dish took shape, it gradually attracted people's eyes. A dish with immortal energy, 9-revolution Great Path prawns. A delicacy cooked with Great Path tea and prawns. Visually, it gave people an unparalleled experience. However, no one knew how it tasted. As Bufong's dish was completed, it didn't have the usual dazzling luster. There's only a faint glow, just like this dish, fresh and elegant. In the distance, a loud boom resounded. The spatula in Zhuang's hand crazily collided with the golden wok, making a clanging sound that attracted everyone's eyes. Inside his golden pot, a towering flame was lingering. The flame spread, and a cry seemed to ring out. It turned into a rock that spread its wings. It was so dazzling that people couldn't help but exclaim, "Sizzle!" Zhuang laughed crazily, his arms exerting force. He tossed the wok. The piece of meat in the wok, which was covered with sauce and had a fragrant aroma, flew out. Countless drops of sauce rose into the air. Boom! It was like an explosion. That piece of meat fell apart, falling on the plate that Zhuang had prepared. Under the plate was a fresh vegetable, which was crystal clear, like a piece of jade. The pieces of meat fell onto the vegetables, and they seemed to have gained elasticity. They were actually bouncing continuously, accompanied by the boiling hot air. With a loud bang, each piece of meat had flames surging on it. Finally, all the flames converged above the piece of meat, forming the shape of a soaring rock. Thud! The huge platter smashed into the void of space. It seemed to have smashed a hole in the void. Fiery rock meat. Done! Zhuang grinned, talking excitedly. In the distance, Bufong used a clean white cloth to wipe the impurities on the plate, exhaling gently. His eyes lifted, looking at Zhuang in the distance. Zhuang also lifted his eyes. Their eyes met. Something seemed to explode in the air. 9-revolution Great Path prawns. Done. Chapter 1397. 9-revolution Great Path prawns? Prawns? Bufong's calm voice resounded through the entire place. It even spread out from the array, lingering in everyone's ears. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Prawns? Even if they were not chefs, they knew what prawns were. They were just river prawns with their heads and tails chopped off. They tasted simple and elegant, flaunting their leisurely elegance. Perhaps the taste would be good, but compared to Zhuang's rock meat, which seemed to stimulate people's taste buds, it was obviously a level lower. Whether it was the aroma of the dish or the visual experience, one had to admit that Bufong's presentation was very creative. It gave people a feeling of floating in the air, like a lotus flower blooming in the immortal world. From the presentation, one could see Bufong's position in this dish. It was just a simple dish. It was neither flashy nor heavy on the palate. It was just prawns stir-fried with tea leaves. Could this thing really win? The more they analyzed, the weirder the people around felt. No matter how they looked at it, it seemed that Bu Fong was going to lose this chef's challenge. The light prawns and the rich taste of the rock meat were obviously not on the same level. Lord Go couldn't help but cover his face with his paws. It's over. Bu Fong boy is too arrogant. A plate of sweet and sour dragon ribs could have solved the problem, but he chose prawns? He's going to be beaten up. Lord Go's voice was a little helpless, but no matter how one listened to it, he seemed to be gloating. This made Di Ting, who was standing next to him, feel disgusted. After all, his opponent is Her Eminence. Even if he used other dishes, the result might be the same. Sweet and sour ribs might not be able to save him, said Di Ting. As soon as he said that, Lord Go was not happy. He glared at Di Ting. Sweet and sour ribs provoked you? Didn't I just steal a few pieces of your sweet and sour ribs? Why are you so pessimistic? The crowd was in an uproar. Some were disappointed, and some felt helpless. Their eyes were filled with despair as they looked at De Zhuang, who was laughing endlessly in the air. His laughter seemed to shake the very air itself. Honorable was about to lose. Once Honorable lost, the outcome of a chef's challenge would be death. It seemed that he would never have the chance to eat the delicious dishes cooked by Honorable in the future. Everyone couldn't understand why Bu Fong would choose to cook a shrimp dish. Seeing that De Zhuang had chosen the rock's exploding meat, it was obvious that he should have chosen an equally fiery meat ingredient to cook a fiery dish to suppress the taste. Only in this way would they have a chance of winning. Bu Fong put his hands behind his back. His expression was very calm. In his hand, the 9 Revolution Great Path prawns were emitting a warm brilliance. Faint steam surged. The prawn meat in the lotus flower was as tender as jade. There was a cut on the back of the prawn, and the prawn line had been picked out. However, the back of the prawn was still pink. It looked pleasing to the eye, like an exquisite work of art piled up in a lotus celadon bowl. The dense white steam was as ethereal as immortal energy. De Zhuang stared at Bu Fong, his eyes surging with confidence. Looking at the prawn in Bu Fong's hand, he didn't need to think to know that he would win. This chef's challenge was not difficult or challenging. He thought about it and felt that it was only natural. After all, the other party was just a mortal, just a great sage, even if he had mastered mysterious power. Even though he had mastered a mysterious power, his understanding of cooking was still incomparable to that of a god. Compared to a god, Bu Fong was still far behind. Oil bubbled on the pitch-black bowl and flowed out of it. Roasted by the flaming meat, the fresh vegetable leaves slowly emitted water vapor. As the rock flapped its wings, it became more and more ethereal. It was a spectacular scene. In terms of plate presentation, it was not weaker than Bu Fong's 9 Revolution Great Path prawns. Buzz, the two finished cooking. Next was the key of the chef's challenge, which was to determine the winner of the dish. The wheel of law spun in the sky. Suddenly, the power of the laws shot out from it. It was the power of law condensed by pure runes. In a flash, it wrapped around the bodies of several onlookers, and they were the chosen evaluators. Fire Demon Patriarch looked confused, but his face, hidden in the flames, burst into an excited smile. He was so honored to be qualified to taste the dish. In other words, at this moment, he could decide the life and death of a god. If he lost the chef's challenge, even a god would be wiped out. He was a little excited at the thought of it. Hades' era looked curiously at the power of law that wrapped around his body. He had come to watch the show, and he didn't expect to taste a delicious dish. It was simply wonderful. There was another rune of law floating in the air, as if it was choosing a taster. The white rune of law floated in the air. Finally, it floated above Lord Go and Di Ting, hovering above their heads. It seemed that it wanted to choose between Di Ting and Lord Go. Di Ting's eyes lit up. Perhaps it was a kind of happiness to have a chance to taste a dish cooked by a god. Buzz, the rune of law, didn't hesitate for long. Soon it made its choice. Swaying, it floated toward the chosen one. Lord Go's eyes widened as he watched the rune of law drift toward Di Ting. Looking at Truth Listener's happy, pig-like laughter, he was immediately unhappy. Just when the rune of law was about to hover around Di Ting, Lord Go opened his mouth and barked. The law of time swirled. His mighty divine sense surged out in an instant. The rune of law seemed to be taken aback. The rune of law, which was flying toward Di Ting, drifted 360 degrees in the air and turned directly to Lord Go's side. It lingered around Lord Go. Lord Go nodded with satisfaction, and the fat on his face jiggled. Di Ting's pig-like laughter stopped abruptly, and he looked confused. How can you be so shameless? That's right. In front of the law of time, a mere law of chef's challenge naturally yielded. 3 people were chosen: Lord Go, Hades Era, and Fire Demon Patriarch. All 3 were extremely excited. This was a dish from a chef's challenge, so its taste was bound to be beyond imagination. Lord Go walked through the air with his enchanting cat-like steps. Before long, he landed at the side of the Wheel of Law. Hades Era flipped his hair, held a spicy strip between his lips, and walked all the way to the side of the Wheel of Law. The experts from both Nether Prison and Earth Prison watched enviously. Fire Demon Patriarch rubbed his hands excitedly. His eyes were red. Have a good taste. It's a rare opportunity to taste a god's dish. Zhuang grinned and looked at the 3 people around the Wheel of Law. When he saw Lord Go, his eyes narrowed. Why did the Wheel of Law choose a dog? Who doesn't know that dogs love meat the most? With a dog as the judge, is there any suspense in this chef's challenge? Can a mere prawn make a dog give up its desire for meat? Zhuang's confidence soared again, and he felt that he was almost inflated. This was not right. As a qualified chef, an inflated mentality was not good for his cooking skills. Bu Fong, on the other hand, was very calm. His eyes were as clear as water, but there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. It's true that dogs love meat, but doesn't this god of chef's challenge know whose Lord Go is? Buzz, under the control of the power of law, the 3 of them flew to the dish Zhuang was cooking. The power of law gathered in their hands and turned into chopsticks. Lord Go looked at the flaming pieces of meat, which looked like a rock spreading its wings in the sky. He bared his teeth for a while, then opened his mouth. He inhaled sharply. The flame seemed to dim a little. A piece of meat flew into Lord Go's mouth, and he began to chew it. As soon as the flaming meat entered his mouth, the flame went out. A mighty meaty aroma exploded in his mouth in an instant. The feeling made Lord Go's eyes light up. This taste, it was completely different from dragon meat. It was a kind of meat that was extremely soft and tender, but it also had a tough texture. As soon as it entered his mouth, it exuded a mellow aroma. Although it looked greasy, it was not greasy at all. The most important thing was that the spicy taste in his mouth exploded, as if the top of his head was about to explode. It was as if a volcano had erupted, causing his entire body to tremble. Fire Demon Patriarch reached out his chopsticks and picked up a piece of meat. Then he put it in his mouth and bit down. Boom! It was as if a great storm had swept over his body, causing his eyes to narrow. The fiery light around his body surged, making him as bright as day. At this moment, his aura became restless, as if it was about to break through. Images involuntarily appeared in their minds. A cry rang out. The vast sea churned and water splashed. A big fish rose from the vast sea of stars. Its name was Kuan, and it soared 90,000 miles into the sky. It turned into a rock, spreading its silver wings, which were as bright as the stars in the starry sky. Its feathers rustled in the wind. Like a bolt of lightning, it streaked across the sky. At that moment, the Fire Demon Patriarch felt as if he had turned into a rock, soaring in the boundless universe. With a flap of his wings, he soared 90,000 miles into the sky and broke through the sky. That kind of unfettered freedom fascinated the Fire Demon Patriarch. Hades Era, Lord Go, and the Fire Demon Patriarch ate the rock meat. While they were immersed in the spicy taste, they could also feel the scene in front of them. It was an illusion presented to them by the delicacy. Zhuang was very satisfied with the situation. Was there a need to compete with such an attitude? He was sure to win. Zhuang's heart was filled with anger. He was sure to win this chef's challenge. He actually wants to use shrimp to win my rock meat. Is this guy's brain filled with water? Rock meat? Bufang looked at the three, who were immersed in the delicious food, and his face became more serious. He had never seen rock meat before, but an ingredient that could compare to true dragon meat was definitely not ordinary. Besides, Zhuang's cooking technique was also extraordinary. The other party's divine sense was very strong, which greatly enhanced his cooking. Therefore, no matter how one looked at it, Bufang was at a great disadvantage in this match. It would be very difficult for Bufang to win. Just as the other side, it was very difficult for Bufang to turn the tables in this chef's challenge. Owner Bu's attitude was very arrogant. Underestimating his opponent was equivalent to throwing himself into a bottomless abyss. However, will Bufang really lose? Hades Tenzang looked at Bufang from a distance. He clasped his hands behind his back, and when he saw Bufang's confident look, he was a little hesitant. For Owner Bu, who was good at creating miracles, it was perhaps too early to determine the winner and the loser. Was there something strange about this shrimp? Plus, it was fried with tea leaves. Could it be heaven-defying? He didn't know whether it could be heaven-defying or not. However, Bufang was confident that those who had not tasted his dishes would be slapped in the face if they made their own conclusions. The corners of Bufang's mouth rose slightly. A moment later, Bufang snapped his fingers. Boom! There seemed to be a rumbling sound of flames. However, only the sound could be heard but not the shape. The surrounding temperature suddenly rose. The 9-revolution great path prawns in front of Bufang gathered steam and aroma over the dish, which seemed to gather into a swaying tea tree. The tea tree was verdant, and as it swayed, the profound will of the great path lingered around it. It sounded like an immortal voice, like the voice of Buddha. The chanting in one's heart made people sink. It was as if they had been enlightened. Lord Go, Hades' era, and the fire demon patriarch, who were immersed in the rock meat, woke up with a start, as if they were bathing in the spring rain. They recovered from the spicy taste. Their necks couldn't help but turn, and their eyes fell on the swaying tea tree in the distance. Under the tea tree, there were small, jade-like prawns swimming slowly as if they had come to life. Chapter 1398. The emergence of this phenomenon attracted everyone's attention. Everyone looked over and saw the dish hovering in Bufang's hand. A white lotus flower quietly bloomed. Its petals seemed to be spinning, emitting a sparkling and translucent light. Of course, this was not the point. The point was the tea tree floating in the air, swaying gently. There seemed to be specks of light on the tea tree. Immortal music, Buddhist chanting, and all kinds of other sounds lingered. Lord Go, Fire Demon Patriarch, and Hades' era all woke up from their intoxication with the rock meat. Their eyes and attention were all attracted by Bufang's dish. Buzz, in the sky, the power of law began to spin. The spinning wheel of law seemed to project a strange power. The wheel of law rumbled, and bright stars floated in it. There were 3 rows in total, and each row had 10 stars, which represented the evaluation of Lord Go, Hades' era, and Fire Demon Patriarch for Zhuang's dish. This was the evaluation they respected in their hearts, and there would be no selfishness or falsehood in it. All the people present raised their heads and stared at the wheel. The evaluation of a dish was closely related to the result of a chef's challenge. Since they were unable to taste the great rock meat, they could only rely on this score to guess the taste of the great rock meat. Buzz, there was a buzzing sound, and in the next moment, the first row of stars on the wheel began to light up. The first row represented Hades' era's evaluation. At this moment, half of the runes of law floated away from Hades' era and poured into the wheel of law. As the runes of law returned, the stars began to slowly light up. 1, 2, 3. When the stars lit up, everyone's mind seemed to be attracted. Even Zhuang, who had always been very confident in himself, couldn't help but look sideways at this moment. He wanted to know the evaluation of his dish. 8. 9. Finally, the stars stopped lighting up. 9 of the 10 stars were lit up, and the last one hung alone on the wheel. An uproar suddenly resounded. 9 stars. He actually got a high score of 9 stars. Everyone was extremely shocked, and they felt that the possibility of Bufong making a comeback was even smaller. Even the picky Hades era gave him 9 stars. How was he supposed to win? How is it possible that I am only a 9-star jadeite? What's not good enough? However, De Zhuang was very dissatisfied with this evaluation. He widened his eyes and stared at Hades' era. A terrifying pressure erupted from him in an instant. He didn't understand. He had doubts. Not having 10 stars was a disgrace. Why 9 stars? It's easy to understand. Nether King Erhot sucked in a deep breath, using his hand to comb his hair. His long hair spread out, and a hint of melancholy appeared on his face. He took out a spicy strip, put it in his mouth, and sucked it in and out. Do you know why I deducted 1 star? It's not that I don't want you to get arrogant. It's just that, although your dish is delicious, it can't make me forget the taste of chili strips. That's a failure, so I'll deduct 1 star. Work harder next time, Hades' era said, holding the spicy strip in his mouth. The people around him couldn't help but roll their eyes. De Zhuang nodded seriously. You're right. The main feature of my dish is that it's hot. It's impossible to remember other dishes after eating them. Since you can remember them, it makes sense. Deduct 1 star from me. Although De Zhuang was very unwilling, he still admitted his mistake. Next, it was Fire Demon Patriarch's turn to evaluate. He was still immersed in the delicious food and couldn't extricate himself. He had never eaten this kind of delicacy. It was as if the fire demon on his body was becoming more and more vigorous. That kind of feeling was really wonderful. 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, Buzz. After a while, under everyone's gaze, the stars slowly lit up. In the end, they stopped at 9 stars. All the people present were slightly taken aback. No one expected that Fire Demon Patriarch would also give 9 stars. Why? De Zhuang asked coldly. If he couldn't give him a satisfactory answer, he would definitely slap the Fire Demon Patriarch to death. I wanted to give you full stars, but I suddenly remembered a legend told by my ancestor. It is said that the food that can truly enter the heart of a fire demon will extinguish the flames on his body. Fire Demon Patriarch said, although your dish is delicious and intoxicating, it can't extinguish the flames on my body. So, I gave you 9 stars, leaving 1 so that you won't be too proud. Believe it or not, I'll beat you to death, De Zhuang said coldly. Fire Demon Patriarch shivered all over. After all, he was now entangled by the runes of law, so he couldn't fake it. He gave the score based on his own ability. Why should he be beaten to death? De Zhuang was just trying to scare him. He was just dissatisfied that he didn't get full marks. His eyes shifted and finally fell on Lord Go. A dog should get full marks this time, right? Dogs love meat the most. It's impossible that I won't give full marks this time. If I can't even conquer a dog, what's the difference between me and trash? He was full of confidence in conquering the black dog. The fat all over the Lord Go's body jiggled. Then, he raised his eyes and glanced at De Zhuang. De Zhuang seemed to hear a faint grunt. Then, the stars began to light up. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. De Zhuang's pupils constricted. Soon, it's going to be full. I should be able to conquer a dog, right? Suddenly, the expression on De Zhuang's face froze. He felt that his face was mercilessly slapped by the black dog's paw. The slap was so crisp and deafening. 8 stars. The score stopped at 8 stars, and it didn't continue to light up. What did that mean? It meant that his dish couldn't even conquer a dog. Moreover, it got the lowest score in the whole field. You dog, have you ever eaten rock meat? How can you turn a blind eye to rock meat? De Zhuang almost growled. The score was far beyond his expectation. The Lord Go lazily raised his eyes, glancing at De Zhuang. Why does the Lord Go need to explain his score to you? Ugh, what an arrogant dog. Then, under everyone's watchful eyes, the Lord Go, with his elegant cat-like steps, came to Bufong's side. As soon as he got closer, the Lord Go's pupils constricted. He smelled a wave of thick aroma assailing his nostrils. The aroma of tea and prawn meat. The Lord Go knew that if Bufong wanted to use prawn meat to make a hot dish, he could do it. For example, the spicy blood lobster. However, this time, Bufong chose a plain and tasteless prawn stir-fried with tea. This puzzled the Lord Go. Hades' era also came over, curiously sizing up the dish. He had to admit that Bufong's dish was much more exquisite than Zhuang's. Every prawn was handled just right. The dense, immortal energy drifted in the air as if they were in the world of immortals. The fire demon patriarch also drifted over. His nose twitched as he came closer and closer. Bufong glanced at fire demon patriarch and frowned slightly. "Be careful of the fire," Bufong said lightly. The fire demon patriarch froze. Fire? What fire? How could he, a mighty fire demon, be afraid of fire? He thought that Bufong was just trying to scare him, so he didn't mind and continued to come closer. The swaying tea tree seemed to exude a charm that kept pulling at his mind, making him want to sink into it. Suddenly, when he approached the dish, the fire demon patriarch's eyes widened, and he let out a roar. His face suddenly contorted and actually began to slowly distort and then disappear. What's going on? The fire demon patriarch's mind was trembling. This is too terrible. What the hell is going on? Why is my face disappearing? And I'm a fire demon, so what's with the burning sensation on my face? Is there a fire roasting me? But where the hell is the fire? Bufong sighed softly. Bufong was too lazy to pay attention to this death-seeking fire demon. However, he still snapped his fingers. Immediately, the invisible flame burning on the fire demon's face flew back to Bufong's side. The invisible flame was the divine flame. Even an immortal flame would be burned, let alone the fire demon patriarch. 9 Revolution Great Path prawns have a taste, Bufong said. Lord Go glanced at Bufong in surprise. He seemed to be a little surprised by Bufong's confidence. Hades' era, on the other hand, flicked his hair and couldn't wait to reach out his chopsticks. The chopsticks fell. He couldn't pick up the slippery prawns. This feeling made Hades' era blush. My mistake, Hades' era pursed his lips. The next moment, the chopsticks fell again. In an instant, he successfully picked up a pink prawn. At this moment, he seemed to pick up the whole world. Glory, glory, and emotion flooded his face. Of course, the most important thing was to taste the prawn. He opened his mouth and put the pink prawn into his mouth. At first, Hades' era didn't care about it. In his opinion, this prawn was like jade, and it should have a bland taste. But as soon as it entered his mouth, he chewed for a while. The springy taste of the prawn made Hades' era's face freeze. Hades' era chewed faster. His eyes opened wider and wider. How is this possible? Hades' era said in disbelief. His attitude had already caused the surrounding people to be extremely dumbfounded, and they felt an itch in their hearts. Bland soup? If that was the case, it would be a big mistake. The corners of Bufong's mouth rose slightly. This dish was the debut of the invisible divine flame. It was the debut of a divine flame that had devoured countless immortal flames and nether flames. How could it be bland? Boom! Hades' era's face turned red in an instant. He felt as if a bottle of 5 flavors had been knocked over in his mouth in an instant. All kinds of strange tastes floated in his mouth. In fact, he could even taste the spicy strips. Spicy strips? How could this be possible? How could there be spicy strips in the prawn? The bitter taste of the tea was incomparably rich. After it entered his mouth, he felt as if his vast heart had calmed down. A small leaf drifted down and landed on the tea, causing ripples to appear. Hades' era narrowed his eyes. He was immersed in the various flavors of the prawn. Fire Demon Patriarch didn't believe that you could taste the prawn. Could this prawn be better than the rock meat? Fire Demon Patriarch picked up 2 prawns with his chopsticks and stuffed them into his mouth. He chewed instantly. However, the moment the prawn entered his mouth, Fire Demon Patriarch paused. The flames on his body seemed to flicker. What a stimulating taste it was. It was as if there were waves surging in his heart, and his body was floating in the vast sea, feeling the monstrous water vapor blowing toward him. Majestic shrimps wearing armor rushed out of the sea and stabbed his body with their spears. Oh! Fire Demon Patriarch closed his eyes. He felt as if a tea tree was slowly growing above his head. He felt that what he was eating was not prawns, but a whole world. It was incredible. Sizzle, as Fire Demon Patriarch fell silent. The next moment, the flames on Fire Demon Patriarch's body went out. Everyone present was stunned. Their faces were blank and lifeless. What happened? Fire Demon Patriarch's fire was put out by a dish. Lord Go was astonished and curiously raised his paw. Immediately, several prawns flew out and shot into Lord Go's mouth like bullets. Thousands of words converged into one sentence. F***ck me. Lord Go's eyes widened in an instant. His fur stood on end, and his fat jiggled. Are these prawns? Are you sure they're not sweet and sour dragon ribs? Chapter 1399. Are these F***king prawns? Lord Go had never thought that prawns could taste like sweet and sour ribs. He must have eaten fake prawns. No wonder Bufong was so confident. It turned out that he was still cooking sweet and sour ribs. Since it was sweet and sour ribs, why didn't you say so earlier? If you had, Lord Go wouldn't have eaten rock meat. Compared with sweet and sour ribs, rock meat was nothing. At most, it was a tasty fart. Lord Go bared his teeth and took another deep breath. A few more prawns flew out, accompanied by white mist that lingered like immortal energy. As soon as the prawns entered his mouth, the taste of sweet and sour ribs exploded. Not only did it have the taste of sweet and sour ribs, but it also had the calming aroma of tea. Lord Go narrowed his eyes. His body swayed slowly in the air, his tail wagging left and right. He was immersed in the delicious taste of sweet and sour ribs. The people around were stunned. Dogs also like to eat prawns? It didn't make sense. Shouldn't dogs like to eat meat and bones? How could those bland shrimps satisfy a dog? Could it be that Lord Go and Bufong had put on a show in order to win this chef challenge? Many people couldn't help but have such a thought in their minds. Zhuang's eyes shrank as he looked at the black dog's intoxicated look. As a chef, he could naturally tell whether a dish was real or not from the expression on a diner's face. There was no doubt that this black dog was deeply intoxicated by the prawns. Damn it! He didn't expect that a dog would like to eat prawns instead of meat. There was actually a dog in this world that didn't eat meat. Hades Era and Fire Demon Patriarch narrowed their eyes, feeling the change in the taste of the prawns in their mouths. When they opened their eyes, there was only amazement in their eyes. Once again, they flew over, picked up the prawns with chopsticks, and prepared to send them into their mouths. Spicy strips. The taste of the sea. Hades Era and Fire Demon Patriarch shouted at the same time. The people present were shocked once again. They tasted spicy strips after eating prawns? There was actually such a thing? And what the hell was that smell of the sea? Everyone present was dumbfounded and didn't know what to say. Slurp, slurp. The void was so quiet that only Hades Era, Fire Demon Patriarch, and Lord Go were left eating shrimps. The bouncy prawns bounced around in his mouth, as if they were gently knocking against the walls of his mouth. After a long time, the shrimps were finished. All that was left of the plate of prawns was a lotus plate carved from a spirit fruit. There was some milky white juice and some scattered leaves of the 9-revolution Heavenly Path tea tree, but the prawns were all gone. Buzz, the wheel of law in the sky changed. It actually began to slowly revolve, and there seemed to be the power of laws bursting out from it, entangling with it. Runes of law flew out of Lord Go, Hades Era, and Fire Demon Patriarch and poured into them. The radiance of the stars appeared. Obviously, the final evaluation was about to begin. Everyone's eyes were drawn to the stars in the sky. They also wanted to know the outcome of this match. Could Owner Boo continue to create miracles in the face of a dish cooked by God? Zhuang took a deep breath, and his aura fluctuated. His cooking utensils disappeared. However, his aura became more and more oppressive. For some reason, he, who had always been confident, felt a little crisis this time. Yes, it was a sense of crisis. For some reason, he felt that he was going to lose this match. Impossible. How could I lose? This guy is just a mortal. I'm the god of Chef Challenge. Zhuang's eyes burst in a bright light. Rumble. Hades' era's evaluation came out. The light of the stars lit up in the sky. The speed was slow, neither fast nor slow. 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars. Everyone held their breath and stared at the stars in the sky. Looking at the stars that were formed, they burst forth with light. Their eyes were filled with shock. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the stars in the sky. His face was expressionless, and he was very calm. He was very confident. His confidence was like a heaven-shaking wave, battering Zhuang's mind. It made Zhuang hesitate. Why is this mortal so confident? That mysterious power can't work on dishes. Why is he so confident? Good heavens! It's 8 stars. No, it's 9 stars. It's a tie. The audience widened their eyes. When they saw the stars under the wheel of law stop shining after 9 stars lit up, they sucked in cold breaths and exclaimed, 9 stars! It was the same score as Zhuang. This meant that there was still suspense in this chef challenge between a god and a mortal. Bufang's face was calm as he stood where he was. Looking at the stars in the sky, the corners of his mouth curved upward. Why? Why did a shrimp get 9 stars? It's actually equal to my rock meat. Zhuang seemed a little unconvinced. He lowered his voice and asked. This question was directed at Hades' era. Hades' era raised his hand to rub his sharp chin. Then, he flicked his hair and revealed a gentle smile. Bufang young man's dish. How do I put it? Perhaps it's not as strong as your rock meat, but it has a silky taste, like a little stream lingering in my heart. It can sense what you need. Bufang's eyes widened as he spoke. Hades' era's eyes seemed to shine. He was savoring the shrimp's taste. What he said was fair. The 9 Revolution Great Path shrimp was not as spicy as the rock meat. However, this dish had a unique meaning. That kind of meaning could be said to be emotion. A dish with emotions shocked Nether King Air Ha lot. He could even taste the spicy strip. This was the taste of the spicy strip he dreamed of. Spreading his arms, Hades' era's hair fluttered despite the absence of wind. Zhuang gritted his teeth. What kind of F***king dish has emotion? How could a dish have emotion? Even though he was the god of Chef's Challenge, he had never heard that a dish could have emotion. A dish is a dead thing. Nonsense. Zhuang snorted softly, then turned his eyes to Fire Demon Patriarch. The shock and intoxication on the latter's face when he ate his dish did not seem to be fake. Perhaps there will be a miracle in Fire Demon Patriarch. Over the wheel of law, the rating star belonging to Fire Demon Patriarch emerged. Slowly, it began to light up. Bufang raised his head and looked at the wheel. Is this Fire Demon Patriarch's rating? Perhaps this will become a decisive key score. Everyone was watching. Fire Demon Patriarch was curious. He didn't know how many points he would give the shrimp in his heart. In fact, the flavor that made his heart palpitate made Fire Demon Patriarch's expression change a little. If he could give this dish a score himself, he hoped it would be 10,000 points, because this dish really gave him an unprecedented experience. Rather than calling it a dish, it was more of a feeling that transcended the soul. I finally know the taste of the sea. 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars. Under everyone's gaze, Fire Demon Patriarch's rating star kept lighting up. Before long, it was shining brightly. 10 stars stood side by side in the sky, dazzling and dazzling. All 10 stars were lit up. Everyone stared blankly. They were dumbfounded and shocked. They didn't know what to say. Full stars. All 10 stars lit up. This was an extremely unbelievable matter. Zhuang's body trembled. Even with his vision as a god, he was shocked beyond words. 10 stars. Sure enough, everything is fake. Why? Zhuang's eyes turned red, and a terrible aura burst out of him like a thunderclap, that was about to blow up everything. Fire Demon Patriarch's body trembled, and he felt an unprecedented fear. This fear made his heart tremble. I told you that a dish that can extinguish my flame is the most delicious dish. This plate of prawns did it. Fire Demon Patriarch couldn't help but say, his body trembling. As a fire demon, I've never felt the taste of the sea because I can't experience the feeling of the warm seawater flowing through my throat. But when I ate the prawns, I felt the taste of the sea. Fire Demon Patriarch closed his eyes, and the flame on his body flickered. He extinguished my flame, so this dish is perfect. 10 stars is not too much. Oomph. Zhuang flew into a rage. A fist smashed down fiercely. Down below, the entire Nether Chef clan's land had completely collapsed and turned into ruins. The shattered stones continued to crack. A terrible aura burst out of him like an oven. Fire Demon Patriarch's heart trembled. Only then did he come to his senses. The almighty expert in front of him was a god. Zhuang was furious, but he didn't say anything. After all, with the wheel of law, Fire Demon Patriarch couldn't fake it. However, he was still very upset. Finally, he turned his eyes and fixed them on the black dog. Now, his only hope was this black dog. It only gave his rock meat 8 stars, which showed that this dog was very picky. This meant that this dog was very picky. How many points would such a picky dog give Bufang's prawns? The dog's rating was the key. So far, Zhuang's star score was already 1 star behind Bufang. If he wanted to win the chef's challenge, he had to give the Lord Go a 6-star rating. Only then could Zhuang win with a 1-star gap. If he gave the dish 7 stars, because the first to be tasted had an advantage. Even if the number of stars was equal, the winner would still be Bufang. Zhuang was under great pressure. He clenched his fists. Behind Zhuang's back, a powerful illusory figure seemed to be able to blot out the sky. Even a god would be excited at such a moment. They would also look forward to a miracle. Bufang exhaled softly. I've raised a dog for 1,000 days, but I'll use it for a moment. Don't let me down, Lord Go, thought Bufang. His mind settled down. The runes of law arose from Lord Go's body and rushed into the wheel of law. Buzz, it was as if thunder was surging and rumbling. Soon, 10 unlit stars appeared in the wheel of law in the sky again. These stars belonged to Lord Go. 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, the radiance of the stars gradually brightened, and soon, it reached 9 stars. 9 stars? The result was out. There was no delay. However, this result refreshed everyone's worldview. 9 stars. Lord Go only gave Zhuang's rock meat 8 stars. Instead, he gave Bufang's prawns 9 stars. What did this mean? It meant that Bufang's prawns had won the chef's challenge. Didn't dogs like to eat meat? Since when could prawns win the Lord Go's favor? Not only Zhuang, but everyone else was confused. They had guessed the beginning correctly, but they had guessed the ending incorrectly. Lord Go's rating of 9 stars. That made Bufang's score crush Zhuang's. In this chef's challenge, Bufang won. The result was out. The power of law in the sky made the final evaluation. Rumble, a terrible aura seemed to rise and fall. The wheel of law rumbled and surged, spinning toward Zhuang's body. Crack, crack, in front of everyone's eyes, Zhuang's body slowly began to crumble from his lower body. Slowly crumbled. Slowly crumbled. Zhuang's eyes were fixed on the black dog and Bufang. How can my rock meat lose? Zhuang growled. The god of chef's challenge roared behind his body. That was a roar of indignation. He was a dignified god, but he actually lost to a mortal in cooking. Lord Go stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Do you think that's an ordinary prawn? A prawn that tastes like sweet and sour ribs is definitely not an ordinary prawn. Lord Go snorted. Losing to sweet and sour ribs is not an injustice. Opportunistic mortals. I will not forgive all of you. Zhuang roared, his eyes red. His body was constantly crushed by the wheel of law. Finally, as the roar faded, Zhuang's head was completely shattered. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.